I can't see where the clock is.
It's got a
Oh, it's
reflection.
past. Okay, it's got a reflection.
Right before you start.
Oh, go ahead. Just in case you were napping. Let's now look at the rules for the administration of school transformation grant program. We are going to have a rulemaking hearing under 1 CCR 301-95. The State Board voted to approve the notice of rulemaking at its September 12, 2018 board meeting. A hearing to promulgate these rules was made known through the publication of a public notice on October 10, 2018 through the Colorado Register and by State Board notice on November 7, 2018. State Board is authorized to promulgate these rules pursuant to 22-2-1071C CRS. Commissioner, is staff prepared to provide an overview, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Brenda Bausch, our accountability specialist.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The purpose of this rulemaking hearing is to incorporate technical changes that were enacted during the 2018 legislative session with the passage of House Bill 1355. It's altering a grant program previously known as the School Turnaround Leadership Development Grant. Now it's the School Transformation Grant. The bill essentially expanded the scope of the grant, so Turnaround Leadership Development will still be a part of it, but in addition to leadership development programs, schools and districts in priority improvement and turnaround may also apply for grant funds for instructional transformation, educator professional development, or to implement one of the statutory options for schools at the end of the clock. So they could pursue it for if they're pursuing an innovation plan or a charter conversion, they could use these grant funds for that as well. The rules were presented in notice at the September board meeting. Since that time, we received a few comments, not much feedback, but we did receive a couple technical changes. One was at the board meeting. Board member Rankin suggested changing the word surveys, and we went back to rubrics, which when I went to look into it further was the original term used in statute. So it made sense to just go back to rubrics and mirror that language. So thank you for that suggestion. And we also received feedback that we were, in terms of the section where it says what you can use the grant funds for, there was a series of ands instead of ors, so it made it sound like a school or district had to do all of the activities. So we changed that to make it clear that they would select from this menu and use the funds for what they needed to use it for. So that was the only technical feedback we received. And if you do have a unanimous vote today, then those rules will go into effect, and we would move forward with that grant program.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to testify to these proposed rules?
Madam Chair, we did not have anybody signed up this afternoon.
Anybody here? All right. Before we have discussion, may I have a motion? Board Member Durham? Gotcha again.
Yeah, no, I'm discussing.
Board Member McClellan?
I move to approve the rules for the administration of the School Transformation Grant Program 1 CCR 301-95.
Thank you, Board Member McClellan. That's a proper motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Durham. Discuss away, sir.
I just have a couple of quick questions. How much money is in the total grant this year?
It's been in previous years $2 million that the grant program has had, so we would expect that would be put forward in the budget this coming legislative session as well.
So there's $2 million currently for the current fiscal.
Yeah, you're gonna say that.
Yeah, it's part of our budget request to ask for additional funding there.
Okay. And then, as I understand this program, we will identify acceptable providers to provide this service. We'll come up with a list. Is that, I'm reading from page,
Yeah.
the red line version, page 2, 2.01.
There is an approved provider list for the turnaround leadership development programs. There's a statute outlines a specific approval process for that, and so we have conducted that, and there is a regular provider list.
How many are on it? Do you know, roughly, I don't. 9. Okay.
9.
Thank you. Okay. And then we, the way it works, the district would apply to send X people to, or to train X number of people, and we would either grant the full cost or part of that cost. So the subsidization that's referenced at the bottom of page 3 of the red line is subsidizing the cost incurred, fits that criteria. Is that correct? And then,
That's correct.
and then just, I think that's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Board Member Rankin?
Just to take that a step further, does a professional development also, do we have a list of providers, and does that back up the leadership? Or is this any professional development that the school wants to have and doesn't necessarily provide turnaround leadership?
Yes, that is a separate area of use for the funds, so it's different than the turnaround leadership provider or turnaround leadership development grants or programs, and so that would go through our grant process. It all goes through our easy grant review process, and reviewers then determine whether that's a legitimate need and how that would how that would play out.
Board Member Flores?
How small and how large are the, are the grants? What's the smallest and what's the largest that you can think of?
Yeah, I think that's.
I'm gonna bring up Lindsay Jekyll, the director of
Because
school
2
turnaround.
million, 2 million seems like
Oh, now we
not very much money.
Yeah, the grants could range from as small as $9,000 for a single principal to attend a single program to up to about $80,000 for a whole school to attend one of the programs. And in those types of programs, districts can apply to have multiple schools attend, so the grants can range up to about $300,000 if they have multiple schools who want to attend. So either individual principals, a team from a school, or a group of schools could all attend. We have a variety of programs they could choose from.
And my second question is there usually a lot of people kind of lining up and that don't get the funds that are?
No. So we have a strong demand, but what we're able to usually do is ask them to, say, pay for travel or extra stipends out of their local funds so that we can fund as many participants as we can using these funds.
That's good. Thank you.
We're in a little bit of a different situation this year than we have been in the past. Because of the change in legislation, those funds can now be used for more opportunities and more different needs of the schools or the districts. And so in the past, the only use of those state funds was for the School Turnaround Leaders Development Grant. Now that it is broader, we may be getting more applications in. We'll know that soon. The applications are actually due today. So we'll know soon
So
after
is there a
that.
plan then to ask for more money from the legislature?
It's part of our decision item that's already gone over across the street.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Board Member Shepherd?
And does it include mentoring and on-site support, or is it just going to a meeting or going to a?
No, part of the criteria for qualifying for a turnaround leadership development program is that it has an externship or ongoing mentorship practical application component. So all the providers had to provide some kind of on-site support in order to qualify as part of that RFP review process.
And does
It
it-
looks different for every program though.
So can the person come actually to the district or school?
Yep, so it depends on, the frequency depends on the program, but at least all of them have some on-site component for that coaching.
Thank you.
Board Member Rankin?
I don't know if this has happened before, but it says the department will analyze and summarize the reports received from the grant recipients and give them to the state board. Have we had that before? Okay, so this will just continue with this particular grant, and we will receive that?
Yes. Yep,
And it'll include the PD and the turnaround leadership? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Board Member Flores, did you have your hands up?
Well, just what role do the universities play in helping these students or these teachers that are already out there?
This
I
is
mean, I
leadership.
know that in other states, they really keep close tabs, and they also provide some assistance when those teachers or that particular school that has a large number of their students, well, that school is not doing well.
Yep. The University of Denver actually is one of our providers and has two different programs. It has an aspiring principals program and a current leader program. So they've developed two programs that that participants across the state can choose to sign up for and earn a master's degree or their principal license through that.
My
program as
question
well.
I'm asking about over and above. The people are already out on site, and yet this is a school that has a large number of already graduated students. They already have their degrees, but they find out who they are, and then they provide mentoring, even maybe getting more students to go out and help and tutor and do, things like that to really get that school, provide more extra and above
Yeah.
tuition and all that.
Many of the programs are for current sitting principals to provide additional mentoring and support for them in a turnaround setting. So they bring in the expertise for sitting principals to provide that professional development. But some of the programs are for teachers, teacher teams, aspiring teams. We try to meet the needs of a lot of different leadership components in the program.
But those people are not paying the school at the time. This is ad hoc afterwards.
No, I'm not sure I understand your question, but they're in our identified priority improvement and turnaround schools right now, getting this additional support. The grant provides support to those schools while they are
Right.
as leaders of the school.
Yeah, so the answer is no, probably.
Oh, I see.
Board Member Rankin?
On 202, the duration of the grant, it's 3 years, is that correct?
It can vary. So
Up
we
to 3
it can be up to 3 years. Some of the programs are single-year programs, some are 3-year programs.
So here,
Depends.
it says here that if the department finds that the grant recipient is not making adequate progress toward achieving the goals identified in the grant program, you can rescind it. So does that apply to the 5-year on the clock turnaround and they get a grant for leadership and now they've gone on and they're not improving? Have you had to rescind any of them up to this point?
We have not rescinded in that situation. We have had a district that has had leadership turnover, for example, and they don't want to participate in the program they identified, so they've decided not to pursue that program, has been the situation that we've rescinded a grant in the past, but it was a district and CDE choice.
But we haven't done any for after the 5-year clock that have been given and not made any great gains? Okay.
Not with this funds, because we haven't been able to use it.
Any other questions? Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve these rules. Ms. Birdsall, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores.
Yes.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Rankin.
Yes.
Board Member Sheppel.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously.
All right. You got your grant and you got your money.
We don't have the money.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Ms. Cordial, assuming that we did get one of these reports, I'm sure we did, could you send it to us again, because now it's on our radar?
Sure.
Sad truth is that sometimes these reports come when we're scrambling with something else and it's not in front of our, do you know what I mean? Just kind of putting together the history with the current item is really helpful sometimes. Okay, do we have all the Pueblo School District members who want to speak or who plan to speak? I'm asking this because it's 10 of 2, and if everyone is here, we could begin, but if not, we must wait. Oh, whoa, puppy dog fair. It's okay. It's your baby, I know.
Your name tag's back there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
answer to my question, yes. Everyone's here?
Yes, everybody is here.
So now.
Thank you. All right, the State Board of Education will now conduct a hearing in case number 17-AR-6 concerning the accountability status of Heroes Middle School and Risley International Academy of Innovation in Pueblo City Schools. This matter is coming back before the board pursuant to the board's June 16, 2017 written determination. Under the Education Accountability Act, if a school or district remains on priority improvement or turnaround after the state board directs an action, the state board may, in any year, but shall every 2 years, require the district to continue the previously directed action or undertake additional or different action. During this hearing, the board will be considering the report and recommendations of the State Review Panel pursuant to 22-11-2105B CRS. This report and recommendations are included in the record and are available on board docs. The commissioner and her staff are here today to present an overview of the accountability hearing process and to provide information regarding Heroes Middle School and Risley International Academy of Innovation. Pueblo City Schools will present an update on their plan, how it was implemented, why it has not yet resulted in significant improvements, and proposed steps for moving forward. The State Board's consideration of the matter shall be limited to materials submitted by the district, background information submitted by the department, any written public comment received by the deadline and maintained in the record of proceedings, responses to any additional questions asked by board members prior to the hearing, which are included in the record, and the contents of today's hearing. The department and district shall each have a maximum of 30 minutes to present. The hearing shall proceed as follows. The department shall introduce the matter and provide general background information. The district shall give their presentation. Board members may not interrupt with questions during this time. Ms. Cordial will let you know when 5 minutes are remaining in your presentations. Following the presentations of both the department and the district, the State Board shall have the opportunity to ask questions of the district, the department, and legal counsel, and deliberate for a time period not to exceed 1 hour. Again, I would like to propose that we spend 40 to 45 minutes on individual board member questions and then reserve about 15 minutes for each board member to share overall thoughts with the district and the audience today. In addition, additional time, if additional time is needed, deliberations may carry over to a later time today or the time set aside on Thursday's agenda. The State Board shall deliberate and make a determination by majority vote, assigning appropriate staff or counsel as needed to reduce the board's order to written form. At this time, I would ask the department staff presenters to introduce themselves for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we get started with my department staff introducing themselves, I want to thank the district for coming. I also want to say our thoughts are with your assistant superintendent today. We know that there was a family emergency and she's not with you, and she was a critical member of this team. So our thoughts are with her, and we appreciate you being here. So I'll turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Pearson.
Sure. I'm Alyssa Pearson. I'm Deputy Commissioner at CDE.
Brenda Bouch, Accountability Specialist.
Andy Swanson, Turnaround Support Manager.
So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to just give you again some brief slides, background of the 2 different schools in the district and data on both of those. Then we'll spend some time on the progress monitoring reports, State Review Panel, and then a quick overview of the additional information questions that you asked of the department and the district. And then after that, we'll turn it over to the district. So Pueblo City Schools is accredited with an improvement plan. So just clarify, the district is not on priority improvement or turnaround. They're at the improvement level. They're not here as a district today. They're here to represent 2 of their schools. They have 7 of their 34 schools in priority improvement or turnaround based on the preliminary 2018 ratings. They've decreased that number of schools. Last year they had 11 schools in that status. In 2007, the state board directed action to 3 different schools, to Bessemer Elementary School, Heroes Middle School, and Risley International Academy of Innovation. Based on the 2018 rating, Bessemer earned an improvement rating, is now off the clock, so there's some great celebrations to be done there. So this presentation today focuses on Heroes and on Risley. So Heroes Middle School serves about 268 students in grades 6 through 8. They're housed in the same building as Heroes Academy, which is K-5 school, and the resources and the leadership is kind of combined as a K-8 school. In 2017, the state board directed Heroes Middle School to enter into a contract for external management with the Achievement Network. You'll see the areas of decision-making authority laid out on the slide. Additionally, it was added that the contract should support strengthening school leadership and community engagement as well. The written determination also directed to approve and implement an innovation plan for the school as well. For Risley, Risley International Academy of Innovation serves about 326 students in grades 6 through 8. In 2017, the state board directed Risley to enter into a contract for external management with the Achievement Network, again with similar areas for decision-making authority, and also included that support strengthening school leadership and community engagement as well. And it I'm sorry, guys. You also directed them to continue with their innovation status that they held. So this is the accountability history of Heroes Middle School from 2018 to 2018, or 2010 to 2018. You can see for the last 3 years, the schools earned a priority improvement rating. There was a slight decrease in percentage of points this last year. And again, they were at 38% of points. The cutoff for improvement is 42%. This slide shows you in a little bit more detail the actual results in terms of achievement and growth. And you can see that in terms of achievement in English language arts and math, the school has struggled and has a does not meet rating. Their growth has been at the approaching level, and they're seeing some gains there. For Risley, this slide again shows the overall ratings for the school. They've been at a turnaround rating pretty consistently since 2010, except for 2013. But you will see that there was a good increase in percentage of points between 2017 to 2018. They went from 25% of points, which is the lowest possible, up to 31.4%. They're still in turnaround. Cutoff score for that is 34% to get up to the priority improvement level. And this slide shows Risley's more detailed data. You can see that they've struggled with achievement, and they've had a few little bright spots in growth here and there over the years. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andy Swanson, now to talk about the progress monitoring process.
Great, thank you. So much like Lisa Medler shared this morning about Adams 14, our progress monitoring process is very similar between the two scenarios. So in progress monitoring, these schools alongside the district, a lot of on-site school visits, visits with the district, visits in conjunction with Achievement Network, their management partner, both on-site and with planning with district staff in preparation for this hearing, as well as along the year, and supports as needed, reviewing local data, reviewing state data with them along those lines as far as progress monitoring was concerned across that year. So to that end, for Heroes Middle School, just a reminder, is the K-8 is the school itself, really the way it functions in reality under one leadership. They did have new leadership in 17-18, and last year it took a little bit for that new leadership to get their feet under them as far as running the school, as well as working with the management partnership with the Achievement Network. That team has continued through this year and has steadily gained more footing in the work that they've been doing with the school. The district leadership, when they came before you in the spring of 2017, was all basically brand new to their roles. In fact, I'm not even sure everybody had been hired yet at that point. Since then, there's been continuity in the last year and a half, and I'd say that the district leadership team, in support of the school heroes as well as Risley, has really strengthened the way in which they are supporting and working with the Achievement Network over the course of the last year and a half at each of those schools. The student data at Heroes has consistently remained over the last year below state expectations, both through the SPF, digging further into data, as well as local data when you look at the Achievement Network interim results versus schools across the nation as well as schools across the district. The district can share some highlights and some bright spots. Other than that, one of the other main issues to highlight that's really been a struggle for the school that will also be echoed in Risley is in effective recruiting and retaining of strong talent across the school. This has hampered a lot of improvement efforts and something I know the district has been wrestling with as far as how to solve these, but has really cut off a lot of sustained improvement efforts at the knees. Risley International School of Innovation, similarly to Heroes, also had a brand new team in 2017-18 that had some fits and starts in implementing some of their plan as far as becoming a cohesive school leadership team, working in what it meant to work at that school with the partnership with the Achievement Network. They had some significant school culture concerns that they realized and struggled to address last year. I can say in visits this year, they have addressed a lot of those concerns, and student behavior events have significantly decreased this year. Their student data continues to lag, just like Heroes does, behind expectations, both local and state data, and the same recruitment and retention issues of even having high qualified staff in all of their positions has continued to be a struggle throughout the school. It is something they struggle with all over. Pass over to Brenda.
Great, thank you, Andy. The state review panel conducted a visit in September of 2018, and similar to the Adams 14 situation, there was 2 separate visits, so 2 separate reports, 2 different panelists, and so I will go talk about each individually, each school individually. For Heroes Middle School, some of the findings the state review panel had were that the innovation zone participation has been positive for that school that joined that this last year, and that they've provided flexible scheduling for students and teachers, has led to professional development and shared leadership learning. And they've also found that ANET has been effective in addressing the areas that it is specialized in, which is around providing assessments and coaching and professional development in data analysis and data-driven instruction. Some areas to work on, they found that the ANET, while again effective in those areas, wasn't necessarily fulfilling the other areas that were outlined in the state board's order. And they're not, in particular, the Heroes panel report called out that they're not providing leadership development or performance management and community outreach. Ultimately, they concluded that ANET alone is not enough to move the school to where it needs to be and improve student performance. So their recommendation was for an external management partner to be brought, another external management entity to be brought in. They did recommend continuing with innovation status due to the benefits they've seen from that. And they did recommend continuing with ANET. But they called out that the additional management entity should have full decision-making authority over a host of areas which mirror the original directive that the state board issued last year. In commenting on why they did not select charter or school closure for Heroes, the panel said that leadership is developing there and beginning to implement positive change. They did also note that there are high numbers of students with disabilities and special needs at Heroes. They have a couple center programs there, and so that makes it difficult to find a charter provider. And they did not recommend closure because, again, they don't find that there's better options for students, and we're seeing indicators of positive change. Shifting now over to Risley. The findings in the state review panel report for Risley were, it highlighted some of the leadership challenges there and some of the challenges developing the necessary infrastructure to improve student outcomes for students. They did also point to the positive supports the Innovation Zone provides. This panel report did note that they felt that the innovation plan hadn't been fully leveraged, that there were waivers that weren't being fully utilized that the school could be using. And they pointed to a little bit of the ANET not fulfilling their directive as well, that they were focusing on the instructional infrastructure, whereas they were not providing things such as performance management metrics and routines or school leadership coaching, and so they also highlighted that as well. Their recommendation is similar to what was recommended for Heroes, in that they do recommend the continuation of innovation and the external management partnership with ANET, and it in fact called out that that should be scaled up, that the ANET support is at about half day a week of on-site coaching, and they suggested increasing that. But they did note that an additional external management entity should be brought in with the full decision-making authority again, they listed out several areas, particularly calling out the recruiting and retaining of staff and leaders, curriculum instruction, staff supervision, and finances is how the Risley report was laid out. And then they also recommended leveraging innovation waivers to increase flexibility with recruiting and retaining quality staff. The Risley State Review Panel report does note that they strongly considered a charter conversion. They ultimately did not recommend it. They didn't feel that it would meet the specific needs of the community or result in more effective outcomes. And they did not recommend school closure because they did not find that there were other viable options nearby and that other schools nearby were at capacity. That was the State Review Panel summary, and information requested from board members was that came in again before the November 2nd board documents deadline. There were two questions around. There was a question around some charter school options, and then another one around state and federal grant funding. And then we have since then received another request around the district's overall enrollment and facility usage. And hopefully those materials were shared with you as well. In regards to the question around charter school options with the district, it was that would the district's current charters be able to absorb or otherwise manage these two schools? And there are two other charter schools in Pueblo City, well, three technically, but one is the same organization that operates two campuses. And what basically one said yes and one said no. And so I'm not going to read the slide here, but that was the information that was provided to us. And then CDE has also put out our request for information to see if there were charter providers willing to operate in Pueblo, and had a couple responses from that. And the district was also able to submit a statement regarding whether the opening of charter schools that would serve Heroes and Risley, whether that would, how would that affect the school district? And so they issued that statement, which is part of your materials as well. And they noted that there would be a significant adverse effect on the district. And they're here if you have any direct questions about that, they could answer those. In terms of state and federal grant funding, since we last had that hearing in 2017, so for the last school year, Heroes had $18,000 for a state turnaround leadership development grant. And both Heroes and Risley did participate in the CDE turnaround network as well. This is their third and final year, and they do receive a small amount of funding for that program as well, and receive some in-depth support from Andy. I will now turn it over to the district for their presentation.
Thank you. Superintendent Macaluso, could you introduce your colleagues, please? And then go ahead and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Schroeder, Commissioner Anthus, and distinguished members of the State Board of Education. It is, we are very happy to be here today to be able to present an update to you regarding the implementation of the innovation plans and management partnership plans. As Dr. Anthus indicated, that our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning is not able to be with us today. And so I have with me today Mr. Ted Johnson. He is the Executive Director of Continuous Improvement and Innovation. And so either of us are as dynamic as Suzanne Mori, but we're going to make a go of it. Okay? Also in the audience today, I want to recognize several members from our Pueblo City Schools Board of Education. If they would just do a wave or stand so that they can put a name to the face, that'd be great. We have our President, Barb Clementi, our Board Vice President, Frank Latino. We have Board Member Bobby Gonzalez, Board Member Judge Dennis Mays, and Board Member Taylor Voss. Also in the audience, we do have our two principals, Don Johnson, Principal of Risley International Academy of Innovation, and Julie Shuey, who is the Principal of Heroes. We also have Catherine Dieck, who is the Executive Director of Achievement Network Colorado. So in today's presentation, we will be sharing information about our district's overall progress within the last year, as well as specific information regarding the successes and challenges for these two schools. Is somebody going to do the... So as a system, District 60 has made notable progress since the last time that we presented to you in the spring of 2017. And as you are aware, Pueblo City Schools came off the achievement clock as a district in the spring of 2016, and since then we have remained off the clock with an overall accreditation of improvement. As you can see on this slide, preliminary school plan type assignments indicate that we are continuing to see summative progress in our schools. Based on the 2018 school performance framework data, 19 of our schools are now on performance as compared to only 12 in 2017. And I might note that this is the highest number of schools at the performance level that we have ever had. We have 5 schools that moved off the accountability clock this year, and additionally we have recently submitted request an appeal for Minnequa Elementary, and we are hopeful that that request for reconsideration will result in an increased plan type. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed on that one. We believe these improvements are the direct result of a district leadership, the stability that we have achieved in district leadership and significant changes that we have undertaken in Pueblo City Schools. As you know, that I have been in this position since July of 2016, and since that time we have built a very strong district leadership team. As we mentioned earlier, Assistant Superintendent Suzanne Maury comes with extensive knowledge in terms of instruction, and prior to that, that position remained unfilled for over 1 school year. In addition, we have 3 executive directors who were hired directly to supervise and support our schools. And we also have a director of professional development, and also we have secured an executive director of human resources, and that particular individual has experienced background in school supervision and instruction. This strong collaborative team has been instructional in moving district systems forward. We have written and begun to implement a new strategic plan, so that's exciting for us. We have had significant inputs from both district and community stakeholders. This plan includes a new mission, vision, core values, and 5 goal areas, which are currently being timelined and implemented by goal action teams that are comprised of stakeholders including parents, community members, and students to ensure that all voices are part of this implementation of the strategic plan. During the past year, we increased instructional leadership development for our principals and assistant principals, including a close partnership with the Relay Graduate School of Education. All school leaders, coaches, and department chairs were trained and are now completing observation feedback cycles with teachers and are facilitating weekly data meetings in which teachers look at student work to identify performance gaps and collaboratively plan for reteach of priority standards. We introduced a set of instructional non-negotiables and worked with our school leaders to better understand the rigor of the Colorado state standards. We are continuing this work around standards this year, and we have a new prioritized focus on math instruction, and we have hired an outside consultant group to provide a year-long professional development to our teachers and leaders focused on mathematical best practices. This learning includes monthly job-embedded math learning labs and in-school coaching. We also identified a literacy lead at each school, and these lead teachers received training on understanding the shifts in the Common Core, and they have in turn facilitated training for teachers in their respective schools. And they use district-created modules to assist them in delivering that professional development. Although we have much more work to do to get our district and all of our schools into performance, our initial results indicate that we believe that we are heading in the right direction, and we feel confident that our continued partnerships will ensure that this goal is attainable. At this time, I'd like to allow Ted Johnson to be able to provide additional information regarding the individual schools.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Schroeder, Commissioner Anthus, and members of the board. We were originally scheduled to present to you regarding 3 schools this year, an update. But as you know, Bessemer Academy made significant improvements in 17-18 and moved their plan type assignment to improvement and came off of the accountability clock. The district made a change in leadership at Bessemer at the start of the 17-18 school year, and we believe that this change is something that contributed to their success. Bessemer also worked with the Achievement Network, our selected management partner, They worked side by side on planning with them, with teachers, and providing targeted professional development. Bessemer also hired a additional math consultant to develop and implement a daily math intervention model targeted at specific grades and to provide math coaching to teachers. This year, they adopted a new curriculum in language arts to better align with state standards, and they are continuing to work with both ANET and their math consultant. When our schools move ahead, we know it's due to the intentional efforts and efficacy of our teachers in the classroom. Teachers have the most direct impact on student achievement, and the quality of instruction is what matters. While there were improvements at Risley and Heroes, which we will highlight, neither school has yet made enough progress to move off of the accountability clock. Some improvement was seen for both Risley and Heroes on their CMAS median growth percentile rankings in mathematics. At Heroes 6.8, the MGP for students in 7th grade increased from an MGP of 36.5 to the 53rd percentile. And in 8th grade, the improvement was from an MGP of 36.5 to the 42nd percentile. At Risley, students' MGP in math increased slightly across all 3 grade levels. It should be noted that both district and school leadership recognize that in order to accelerate student achievement, nothing short of a consistent MGP of 50 or higher will suffice, and that is something that is evidenced in their UIP goals in both math and in literacy. We also have some local first quarter data this year to indicate that these 2 schools are showing some progress. At Risley International, the first quarter Houghton Mifflin Harcourt math inventory data demonstrates student growth rates increasing in 7th and 8th grade math. In fact, 1/3 of the students in these grades have already made a year's or more growth in math in just the first quarter. Risley's Achievement Network interim results from first quarter show students' overall performance slightly higher in 7th, 8th math as compared to the same time last year. I apologize, unfortunately, on this next slide, in our many iterations of developing this presentation, we had a slide submitted erroneously. There's a misinterpretation of the data on this slide, so I'm going to ignore the numbers up there. We did look at some additional data regarding benchmark data from the beginning of the year for language arts for Risley. And what we're seeing is that there's a decrease in the number of students that are ranking in the does not meet category. In 6th grade, a decrease of 24%. In 7th grade, a decrease in the does not meet category of 43%. And in 8th grade, a decrease of 37% in the does not meet category. Heroes Academy also has some promising local data. School City Mathematics benchmark data shows a decrease in students not meeting expectations. And Achievement Network interim assessment data also shows that students in 8th grade this year are performing slightly better than a year ago, as well as scoring closer to the network average on those interim assessments. Language arts benchmark data shows similar trends, with the percentage of 6th and 7th grade students reducing the number of students scoring in the not meeting category as compared to last year. Language arts interim assessment data shows that students are performing closer to the network average this year than they did a year ago. So we're pleased to see the modest progress in these areas. However, we recognize that there are great challenges that remain. And I'd like to share some thoughts about the developing strengths and continuing challenges at each of these schools. As the direct supervisor at both Risley and Heroes during the past year and a half, I've worked closely with Building Leadership and the Achievement Network coaches and their executive director in implementing our management partnership. The management partnership with the Achievement Network has allowed both schools to identify a limited number of instructional priorities, and these are focused on improving Tier 1 instruction in both English language arts and mathematics. Each school has worked with a coach from the Achievement Network who meets weekly with leadership for half a day. They strategize, they conduct collaborative walkthroughs, and they participate in coordinated planning. Through the use of the Achievement Network's strong assessment tools and analysis platform, each school is working to establish a consistent teaching and learning cycle, and staff use these interim assessments as an opportunity to analyze student performance in relation to the standards. and to identify areas where a reteach may be necessary. Both schools have also adopted a new curriculum for the 2018-19 school year in language arts and mathematics. The new curricula are better aligned to the rigor of the standards and the assessments, and they support better Tier 1 instructional best practices. School leaders at Risley and Heroes have also been working to develop their leadership skills. In addition to their participation in the Relay Graduate School of Education Principal Program, both schools are part of the district's Innovation Zone, which consists of 8 schools in the district. As participants in this zone, the principals at Risley and Heroes are able to network with other school leaders across the district who face many similar challenges. Several of these leaders have worked with their school staff to come off of the accountability clock, and this peer support has provided both technical and moral support needed by the leaders at Risley and Heroes. Our iZone schools pilot innovative best practices, and many successful approaches originally established in iZone schools have now been replicated in other schools across the district. Heroes Academy and Risley International both participated in CDE's Turnaround Network. Last year, provided them opportunities for access and collaboration with turnaround leaders from across the state. And most recently, the principals and assistant principals from Risley and Heroes sat down with a team of district administrators to have some individual interviews where we discussed their individual and school-specific challenges. And from these discussions, common trends were identified, and district leadership has provided or is now providing intensified leadership, coaching, and support for leaders at both of these schools. So as we reflect on the actions and results to date and analyze the state review panel's recommendations, we see 3 persistent areas of challenge that must be addressed for Risley and for Heroes to move off of the accountability clock. Number 1 is talent development and staffing. Heroes and Risley each hired a new principal and 1 new assistant principal at the start of the 17-18 school year, as well as between 10 and 30 new staff. Leadership and teachers need continued professional development to build their effectiveness, and a continued focus on classroom instruction is crucial. Ongoing staffing challenges persist at each school, requiring a focus on staff recruitment and retention efforts as well. Secondly, innovations, systems, and programming. Multiple initiatives and programs need to be streamlined or possibly even eliminated to meet the current turnaround context at each school. More creative solutions and additional use of innovation waivers should be considered, especially as it relates to hiring hard-to-fill positions. For example, we see opportunities to consider alternative compensation structures to address low recruitment numbers in fields that are difficult to hire, such as mathematics and special education. This has a potential to expand the pool of applicants, and we see that as really being crucial. Wraparound services, community partnerships, and resources need to be identified to proactively meet the academic, mental health, and special education challenges of these high-needs environments. We also need to strengthen progress monitoring systems to make more timely adjustments as needed. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we need to examine or re-examine our management partnership selection. While ANET's assessments, online resources, and content support has been very valuable, their limited focus hasn't been sufficient to address the broader context and needs of the school and the school leaders in turnaround. These 2 schools face challenges that must be addressed across a broad range of areas, such as wraparound services and supports, special programming, as well as talent management and leadership development. Some of these areas fall outside of the skill set and scope of the Achievement Network's expertise. We most recently have had very open and honest and productive conversations with ANET about this, and we absolutely would like to continue working with them into the next school year in those areas where they do provide that expertise. However, we do know that a more comprehensive management partner will better meet the needs of our schools. As you may recall, the last time the State Board directed Pueblo City Schools to complete innovation plans and identify a management partner for Bessemer, Heroes, and Risley, we had a very short time frame from about the end of April to mid-June to not only identify a partner and write a comprehensive plan, including decision-making matrix, but also to complete the innovation plans for these two schools. In order to be more proactive this time around, we have put together an aggressive but thorough management partnership selection timeline, which has already been started. Last month, we had the opportunity to attend the EASY Fair, sponsored by the Department of Education, and made initial contacts with a variety of state-approved management partners. From that, we followed that with more extensive conversations with 8 of the organizations, as well as research related to their work in various Colorado and out-of-state districts. We carefully reviewed the state panel reports and collected input from leaders and teachers at both schools on their continued needs and the skill sets they would like to see in a more comprehensive management partnership. Based on this criteria, we will review on the next slide. We've narrowed that list down to 4 state-approved management partners, which we feel are viable given the context of needs at both Heroes and Risley. We have drafted a request for submission of a management partnership plan, and from there we will be identifying 2 or 3 finalists for an in-person interview, as well as visits to each school. Our intention is to make a final selection in January once we receive confirmation of our EASY Grant award, and to start our partnership in the spring of 2019 so that we are fully ready to go at the opening of the 1920 school year. It is our hope that the State Board will direct us to move forward with the selection of a more comprehensive management partner, and if that is the case, we are ready to go in order to continue the implementation of this timeline. Since the management partnership was new to us last year, we spent a good deal of time of reflecting on what did and did not work, and on that basis, we've made revisions for this current year. We've also continued to reflect on how to strengthen this type of pathway as we move forward in selecting a more comprehensive partner. We are hoping to find comprehensive management partners who exhibit the following strengths: previous experience and success in sustaining turnaround in schools with similar demographics, weekly on-site leadership coaching by a Colorado-based leader with a proven track record in elementary and middle school turnaround. We feel it's important that the on-site leadership coach is Colorado-based so that we have consistency and frequency of visitations, and also to ensure that our contract is cost-effective. Staff recruitment and retention resources and strategies is also something we would seek in a comprehensive management partner. And we would like one with background in social and emotional learning structures and programmatic expertise in special education, as well as a strong understanding of instruction, including coaching, data-driven systems, and content-specific best practices. Turn it back over to Charlotte at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So board members, on behalf of my Publicity Schools Board of Education, and Risley International and Heroes Academy, and in alignment with the state panel review recommendation, Publicity Schools is requesting that the state board consider and approve the following action: continue innovation status for Risley International and Heroes Academy, and authorize the district to engage in a more comprehensive management partner for each of our schools. I want to impress upon this board that Publicity Schools leaders at this table and in the audience are committed to ensuring continuous improvement at Publicity Schools, and specifically to the success of Risley International and Heroes Academy. As such, we offer the following commitments. We have already allocated funding from our current ESSA grant to conduct a diagnostic review of special education programs and systems at both of these schools. The district believes that both schools should maintain innovation status so that the new management partner has greater flexibility and ability to implement change through the utilization of waivers, and will work closely with each school to update and revise and rewrite their innovation plan. An ongoing relationship with the Achievement Network is essential so that our schools can continue to use Achievement Network's assessments and online resources and can stay focused on previously established instructional priorities. And finally, we are committed to adhering to the management partner selection timeline previously outlined by Mr. Johnson to begin our work together in the spring of 2019. In summary, since we last met with the state board, we have made significant progress as a district, including moving 7 schools into performance and 5 schools, including Bessemer Elementary, off the accountability clock in just the last year. We have consistency of district leadership. We have written a new strategic plan, and we have developed strong and ongoing partnerships with the Relay Graduate School of Education, the Achievement Network, and 2 Partners Math Consultancy. We are now poised to build off of these strengths, and in collaboration with a comprehensive management partner, we'll be able to move Risley and Heroes off the accountability clock. And we simultaneously continue to we also want to continue to increase the number of performance schools that we have in Pueblo City Schools. And if time allows, at this time I would like to ask our president of the board, Barb Clementi, to come forth and just share her perspectives to the board in support of our pathway request for Heroes and Risley.
Good afternoon.
No.
Sorry? Now? Can you hear me?
Talk into it, please, and let's try that. No. Yep.
Remote control.
Gee, it's a wonderful
You're
thing,
on,
isn't it?
You're on.
Great. Well, good afternoon. I'm here this afternoon to assure you that our Board of Education is committed to implementing the changes necessary to ensure success for our schools and our students. Our Superintendent Macaluso and her leadership team have spent countless hours studying the data and the unique situations of these 2 schools. As a board, we have great confidence in Superintendent Macaluso and in the leadership team that she has put together in less than 2 years. It's no secret that our community and our district has faced some challenges, but the stability and the strong leadership that have been carefully developed through that is evident. And you'll recall that Bessemer, one of our previously troubled schools, has made great strides in student success just over the last year. Both of the 2 schools that we're discussing today are anchors in their neighborhood communities. Closing either one of these 2 middle schools would have a lasting negative effect on those neighborhoods, those communities. And bringing in a charter school for either of them would not only displace but also fracture those communities even further. Our board unanimously supports and strongly encourages moving forward with these 2 schools with a continuing innovation status and engaging a full management partner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, this concludes our formal presentation, and we're happy to engage in dialogue or entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, colleagues? Board Member McClellan?
So I'm gonna, I want to thank each of you for being here with us today and for your candor and for sharing your thoughts about how best to move forward. And I wanted to reiterate the very same question that I opened with in our last hearing, because we have a similar recommendation from the state review panel. So this is of a legal nature. I want to be certain that I'm understanding correctly that should this board approve the plan as recommended by the state review panel, that any charter application, should there ever be one in the future, would still go before the local board, which retains its role in the chartering, in any chartering process, should there ever be an application.
Thank you, Board Member McClellan and Madam Chair and board members. That's exactly right. They would both have the duty and authority to authorize the charter school by vote and to enter and negotiate the charter contract.
So in the event that this board were to vote to implement the changes recommended or to order the changes recommended by the state review panel, any charter application would still have to go before the local elected school board.
Yes.
Thank you.
Questions, colleagues? Board Member Sheppel? You guys be assertive with your arms.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Can you describe how you're working with Relay Graduate School and what role they're playing in professional development?
Absolutely, that's a great question. Mr. Johnson, you want to take that one?
Sure. We work with the Relay Graduate School of Education in a number of ways. Last year, we were able to use a portion of our EASY Award to send district and school leaders at identified schools to either the National Principal Supervisors Academy, the National Principals Academy Fellowship. And so we sent, I believe, 11 folks through that. We also have a special education director and specialists that are attending the first year of the Special Education Leadership Academy with Relay. So that's one of the ways is through that intensive programming that they offer. Another way that we've worked with them this year is we have provided on-site professional development in observation and feedback cycles. We did a 2-day training in June with trainers from Relay. Gave an opportunity for all of our district leaders and several of our district coaches to participate in that training. We had, I think, in the neighborhood of 75 that participated in observation feedback cycle training. And then in August, we brought in from their Leverage Leadership Institute a principal from Tulsa who did a 1-day training for us on weekly data meetings. And we had that attended by over 160 of our staff. That included principals, assistant principals, department chairs at some of our high schools, as well as instructional coaches. We have a third way that we've started working with Relay in the last year. We had the opportunity to help them pilot a regional support partnership, which brought in a couple of leaders from their Relay programs to work directly with district leadership and school staff at several schools. We spent a half day in each time at 4 different schools where we did some on-site walkthroughs and then engaged in a practice protocol with them that allowed us to identify some trends in our data and in our walkthrough data and help the schools identify some things that they would want to address. We continued that partnership with them this year. They are working very closely with one of our elementaries and one of our high schools on that process. That includes every other week coaching for those leaders as well as for several of our district leaders and school supervisors. I do want to point out that through the regional support partnership, we were able to take that protocol and implement a series of learning labs. So we have all of our principals and assistant principals in the district participating in that. They visit one another's schools in cohorts of about 10 folks or so, and they do that same process and collaborate together, and that's really done a lot in terms of our ability to calibrate around what best practice is. It's also been very useful for school leaders who, you know, when you're watching the grass grow, it doesn't always, it's sometimes hard to see what's happening, and so having another set of eyes from their colleagues in there to give support has been very helpful.
May I ask a follow-up?
Please.
Do you feel you have good progress monitoring data to make adjustments quickly? You said you were focusing on Tier 1 instruction right now. And so as you're looking at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 and how those articulate together, do you feel you have good data? And sounds like you have building leadership teams and data teams. Do you have good data?
Yeah, I would say it's mixed. I think we have, as I mentioned in the presentation, we have started to build out the teaching and learning cycle, particularly around interim assessment data. I think that's a real strength of Achievement Network. They've provided great guidance. It's actually something that we've used some of their processes across the district now. They engage in data days. In fact, we just had one a couple of weeks ago that involved all of our Innovation Zone schools, including Risley and Heroes, and they had an opportunity to collaboratively analyze data with their leaders and with colleagues from across the district. I think that part is going very well. I think we're growing in our strength in designing reteach around those pieces. I think some of the more immediate formative majors are still a work in progress. Teachers being able to develop aligned exit tickets and read that data and quickly respond. is still something that we're growing and working on, which is part of why we brought in the weekly data meetings so that we could really hone people's skills. We do have an expectation that all of our leaders are leading at least one weekly data meeting in their building, either with a grade level or with a content level, so that they can gain in that. So it's a work in progress.
Great, thank you.
I'm impressed listening to your efforts to improve leadership over the last couple of years, and yet that seems to be one of the main concerns from the State Review Panel. I'm trying to connect the fact that the one says leadership is not adequate, and yet you're in year 3 of the relay grants, et cetera, et cetera. Can you connect that for me so that it makes some sense, please?
Sure. Thank you for that reflection. As you may be aware that at the implementation of school year 2017, we did do a leadership change at all 3 of those buildings, Risley, Heroes, and Bessemer.
Are they
And
brand new leaders,
they
or
are
are they
new-
moved leaders?
They are. It's different at each school. So. Particularly at Risley, the state panel review did express some concerns with the leadership. That principal is in her first year as a principal, not new to the school. She has extensive background in terms of instructional leadership. She served as a previous international baccalaureate coordinator for the school, and so leadership is still developing in terms of being a new turnaround principal in a turnaround school. So. I would like to add that the level of professional development that we have been able to provide to all of our principals and assistant principals has been a game changer for our district in terms of raising the level of instructional leadership of all of our leaders.
So in thinking about following the State Review Panel's recommendation, and one that sounds like you agree with, which is to bring in some more management help, I don't know that I understand how you visualize that. Are these going to be 2 equal partners? Is the external management organization going to come in and run these 2 schools and then make decisions about the other partner that you have? How do you visualize this working out?
So I visualize this working in terms of the external management partner as a more comprehensive partner. We would like to retain ANET in terms of a partial partner.
But what if they don't want? They don't think it has value.
If after evaluation they don't think that that's value, we would defer to the comprehensive external partner.
Okay. And tell me also, please, about the waivers that you believe would be helpful in terms of your innovation status that you've not taken advantage of.
Sure. Ted, do you want to talk about that? And I'll follow up.
We do have a number of district, state, and negotiated agreement waivers. I think the one that comes to mind immediately is around the areas of talent recruitment and finding ways to attract more teachers, particularly in our neediest schools and particularly in hard-to-teach areas. It's no secret to anyone in this room that there is a teacher shortage that we are in the height of. That makes it very difficult to recruit folks. I think opportunities where we can look at alternative compensation for those folks, consider ways that we might encourage them to retain and stay on with those schools could be one piece where we could exercise those waivers more effectively.
Do you have challenges with your teacher contract and hours of professional development or any other areas where there's the recommendation that that might be a conflict between what a principal believes is necessary for the movement of the school and what's available?
Yes, sometimes that occurs, and we do have a negotiated agreement with our local union.
And?
And so I think that there are definitely areas in which I feel like we could be more aggressive. I think in terms of our waivers, and I also think that there's a need to realign some existing waivers and the way that that's spelled out in the existing innovation plan. For example, Mr. Johnson alluded to, we have a sign-on, stay-on bonus to attract teachers. That's not working. It's not enough to attract and retain teachers. So, you know, maybe we can defer that money to something else. And I think we need to be creative in our ideas, because we really need to think out of the box and do things differently.
Okay. Board Member Flores, go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I think one of the issues I read from the review panel was that teachers are lacking in asking higher order questions and using Bloom's taxonomy. Also, focused instruction is a problem because teachers need to help in directing a classroom. So maybe teaching skills of, you know, vary the teaching skills and not just a lecturing, say, style would be helpful. I know I'm kind of putting this forward, but I think that more training in that would probably be helpful to teachers. I think too that mention was, some of the teachers mentioned that they needed more cohesion, or they needed to feel more part of, you know, the school and such. So that tells me that, you know, some work is needed in bringing teachers together. So I think all of that can be done, and I think that the union could be helpful in this area. Asking, you know, and for this help. I know that at the school that I taught, this is something that the union helped very much in bringing and coalescing, you know, different groups in the school together. So I think there could be entities and not see the union as a problem, but as somebody in your cohort that is helping you. So even in the skills area and such.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. We clearly see that the quality of instruction, we are continuously providing professional development to our teachers.
Sure.
One of the qualities of the observation feedback is to be able to provide teachers with the appropriate coaching and quality feedback that they need to improve the instruction. As you know, many of our teachers, because of the high turnaround rates, many of our teachers are new to the teaching profession, unfortunately, in our highest need schools. And we are continuing to work with our union, and we are continuing to develop and strengthen the collaboration and relationship that we have with our local union.
I wanted to ask you about housing. Is housing an issue? This is something that you might think about that has been, that in other places has been utilized, helping.
For teachers, you mean?
Yes.
That is not something that we have explored at this time.
Okay.
Board Member Goff, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple things here. Can you just say a simple explanation for Tier 1 instruction? What is that?
Sure.
I'm sorry, what is Tier 1 instruction?
Just definition.
Yeah, I would consider it the core instruction, the primary instruction that happens in English and math.
Okay.
Or science and social studies too. Don't want to shortchange those folks.
Science and social studies. Thank you for including them. I think about them every now and
They're
then.
oft forgotten,
Every
so
now
I
and
want
then
to
they
make sure
come to
they're not.
Okay. So it is clear that your hope and your goal, your plan is to keep ANET in addition to
looking at a different kind of management situation. Learning labs, I think it's it's not a totally modern day concept, but it's one of the more fascinating, innovative approaches that we have right now. You mentioned it being for your leaders, building leaders and such. Is there talk, have you tried teacher learning labs as well? Where maybe, the staff of the middle schools do, and in the innovation structure anyway, I would think a lot of this happens among all levels. But is there anything formal in the way of learning labs for classroom teachers?
We don't have anything formal now. That is certainly a great next step that we are thinking about. We have some of our instructional leadership coaches that participate with the administrators, and so they said that would really be the next step, and we're very interested in that. If you want to add anything to that, Ted.
I think that's a great point. A couple of things on that. As we are or have just submitted our EASY application, it's due today at midnight. As we've submitted that, we did include a portion of the relay school turnaround leadership development. There is an instructional leader development program that they offer that's for coaches and for teacher leaders to participate and gain some of those skills. It's also something, while not formalized, has been a discussion in our action goal teams. I happen to be on the student success action team, and there's an objective within that that speaks to teacher, leader and teacher skills. And that conversation was something we just had this past week about are there opportunities to do something similar to that as part of those action teams and as part of our strategic plan.
And have you noticed, been able to or noticed any impact yet from, we're talking about all content, but going beyond math and language arts teachers, and even in a middle school, when you look at whether you call it the explore wheel idea or electives or just the other assortment of content that's available, are all teachers able to find a place to be involved? In the
observation
I know
feedback, or
it sounds like an
yeah.
obvious answer, and I really think I'm looking at maybe a more subtle part of this. But if all content area teachers have a view of their ability to contribute to the overall cause, and where it has gone beyond just math and language arts.
Absolutely. So in our
So
schools,
that-
we have provided a time where we have teachers that have devoted time to engage in professional learning communities. And so all teachers across contents worked collaboratively, and they are doing amazing things in terms of contributing to raising the literacy level, even in their content area of mathematics and so forth. So they are seeing the connections between the contents.
And is part of ANET's role to be aware of that and to encourage and promote and that? Or is that something you're looking to have a new manager be able to gear into right away too?
Currently does that.
An example, I mentioned the data days that we had or data day that we had a couple weeks back. We actually had our social studies teachers alongside our English language arts teachers in the assessment analysis. The Achievement Network analysis assessments include both narrative or fiction and informational passages, and the middle schools, including Heroes and Risley, have really asked their social studies teachers to jump in and collaborate on those instructional practices and own the data from those assessments. So they're using a lot of the similar strategies and approaches and looking at the text complexity and helping students, whether they're in a language arts class or a social studies class, to develop those key understandings and cite text evidence and all those. We really see that literacy piece as being broader than just a subject at a certain time, and it extends in other areas.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Board Member Sheffel.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a follow-up question. Have you surveyed the teachers at all at these schools to say, do they like working with ANET, and then you want a more comprehensive partner? Do they have some feedback on that and some buy-in? We kind of know that close to the site of change in the classroom is where great education happens, and without the buy-in, you can have the best things in place, the plan can look good, the management partner can be well received, but unless people are willing to work with them, see value in it for themselves and their students, it may not be effective. Do you have any data like that where you've asked people doing the work,
Sure.
who would you like to work with and what kind of help do you need?
So we recently, Mr. Johnson did go out to each of the sites and did have a conversation with the staff, and they were able to have input in regard to what sorts of what is the criteria that they're looking for in an external management, what's working, what continues to be needs. I don't know if you want to reflect a little bit on that, Ted.
Yeah, and we had a short timeline between putting together this presentation and the state review panel release to do that. But I did have the opportunity to go out and visit with each of the schools and the staff for a brief period of time and talked about what the recommendations had been of the state review panel. I asked them a couple of questions about what would they want a management partner to know about the school, and two, what needs would they identify in terms of a management partner, like what skills or what things would they want a management partner to bring to the table. Those were very initial and brief conversations. They did highlight a lot of the things that we talked about in this presentation, particularly in terms of some of the holistic needs of students, wanting to look at some of those things. In terms of surveying about the Achievement Network, I don't have any direct data on that. We did survey all of our Data Day participants on their experience with the Data Day, and that was very, very positively received. That work wasn't directly with Achievement Network, but utilizing their structures and approaches.
So just one follow-up question. So when you say a more comprehensive management partner, then is part of that going to be defined by some of the needs you surfaced, like talent development, staffing, recruitment, innovation, systems, and so forth, and then feedback from the teachers, or how are you going to define what that more comprehensive approach looks like?
Right. As part of that process that we outlined very briefly in the presentation, it does include school visits, because one thing I did tell the staff at each of those schools is that in selecting a management partner, we would want to make sure that that they had an opportunity to visit with those finalists and get some insight and provide some input and recommendations into what they were seeing as part of that process.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. Are you suggesting the same management partner for both schools? Or different ones?
We would, we're hoping that one management partnership, but that would differentiate for if there are different needs at the schools.
Right.
The two schools are demonstrating similar needs, but we want them to be flexible enough to be able to differentiate per sites. But I think from a district level, we want to be able to have stability at a district level that we're dealing with one management partnership. So just for ease of management, we would hope that it would be one partner, if that makes sense.
And what if this organization comes to you after evaluating the schools and suggests that one or both of these schools ought to be charter schools? That there's that there's insufficient flexibility in innovation for them to believe that they can accomplish what needs to happen at that school?
We would work very closely with them to ensure that they had the flexibility that they needed.
What was your answer there?
That we
Try
would
that answer a different way.
We would work with them to ensure that they that we resolved any issues that they were identifying as barriers in terms of not having the level of flexibility to implement what they needed to implement.
And what you're saying would be that charter would be out?
I think at this time, charter, we do not believe that charter is in the best interest of the community or our students.
Board Member Flores.
Well, I think that came out in the data that was given by the monitoring site visits, that these are kind of strong communities, and they would be maybe destroyed if you had a charter school. And also, I was very impressed to read that Risley has a clinic. I mean, I guess 30 years ago, people were talking about schools of the future in which the school would serve as a center where medical services would be, and I think that's that's very incredible. And so, I mean,
Risley is very unique in that particular community. It serves as a hub and a lifeblood to the entire community. They do have a school-based on-site wellness center that is open to the entire community and to the students at
Right.
Risley. They also have a Boys and Girls Club that serves all feeder elementary schools in that site.
right. And Heroes has a center for special ed, so that's, I mean, I was kind of taken aback when I read 20 some odd % of the kids were special ed, and I mean, were, well, yes, needed help, and I thought, something's wrong here. I mean, that's kind of high. And then later on, you know, I learned that, that it was a center, so I thought, well, maybe it's because some ESL kids have been misidentified and such, but that's great that you have a center like that.
They do
for-
have a few center-based programs at Heroes and also Risley.
And what, if you have one person, you know, who would come in as your management partner? Yeah, I know you stated that you wanted a person from, or an entity from Colorado who would be here and would not, you know, cost as much as bringing somebody like from Virginia or so, somebody who knew Colorado. So, and that they could be in the school more. I was really also taken aback that the person that you have right now only is there for half a day a week. And it seems to me as if there's all that training that needs to be done for teachers, you really do need to have an on-site person that at least stays on board for 3 days or so.
Right. So we really have been intentional and strategic in identifying what the specific needs were, and that's really behind the Colorado. They would have to have a Colorado person. It's
Right.
really more about the frequency and the duration that they would be able to provide support,
Right.
and less about, you know, how much it's going to cost. Of course, when you're flying different places, it's going to increase the cost, but it's really about how the level of support that they're going to be able to provide, because we need an intensive level of support. We
Right.
recognize that.
Right. And lastly, I'm concerned about the safety of your schools. In meeting with the department, I learned that your school buildings, the structures of your school buildings really need help. That $800,000, that's close to, or no, I'm sorry.
Million.
Isn't it $800 million?
That's correct.
Close to $1 billion that's needed to really help those structures. That's a lot of money, and that they haven't been rebuilt, and like they haven't had any care for 50 years or so. So, I mean, that concerns me, especially, I mean, I have a lot of
But it's
aller-
not our sandbox right now.
No,
I
no,
need to
no.
call on
I'm
Mr. Durham
saying
so that he
I'm-
can get on with this.
Yes, I know, but I'm hoping, and there isn't, I'm hoping that there are legislators out there who can listen, that this school district needs help, really needs help. They can't get teachers, the structures.
So we
that
deeply
means-
care
that
about
means
the help that
help.
we can give
Well,
Board Member Flores.
it
Could you
means
let
the
Mr.
help-
Durham speak now, please?
I will, but let me just finish this sentence.
Okay.
I think that when you have structures that are moldy and they're not safe for kids, we have to worry about the safety of kids. We have to worry about getting those structures up to code so that the health is not compromised. The teacher's health and the student's health is not compromised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam Chair. When you talk about the external management, the new external management partner or consultant, do you envision that as someone who reports to you?
Yes, they would report to me.
So, and you would have the authority under this arrangement to ignore, if you chose, their recommendations or their suggestions about any item they might bring to you.
No, so I think that we have a great track record in terms of how we worked effectively with the management partner. as we identified the decision-making matrix with Achievement Network. I think that worked out well. We would do the same thing with an external management partner, and we would be very clear about delegating specific authority over various areas, especially those areas that were identified in the state panel, in the state review panel.
So if you delegate authority, that means they don't have to report to you on those items.
That would be correct.
So what are the limitations? What items do they do have to report to you on?
So I think we would have to negotiate those various areas that this board felt, and the state panel review, and in collaboration with our organization in regard to those areas that presented barriers, and to move in regard to moving forward. So
Well,
areas such
I
as
think if
staffing.
you're asking us to
instruction.
approve really a puff of smoke. You might or might not agree to give the management company authority over curriculum, let's say, or pick an item, but you're not going to tell us in advance what those are.
I think it's very clearly outlined in the state panel review report. So areas such as recruiting and retaining high-quality staff and leaders, curriculum, instruction, staff supervision.
So if they came and suggested that a particular staff not be retained, that would be their decision, not yours.
That's correct. And we have great flexibility in that area in terms of we would honor our contracts with our employees, but we have methods in which we could transfer teachers to other buildings, or we have at-will contracts for administrators, for example.
So the language that would appear in the contract with the external management company would be clear and unambiguous that the external manager, has the authority to make these personnel decisions.
I would hope that the language would be very clear, and we would certainly consult with our legal counsel and ensure that we have negotiated an appropriate contract that would clearly delineate the delegation of authority.
Thank you.
Board Member McClellan.
Mr. Durham covered a number of the questions that I had, so I appreciate that. I feel remiss in not congratulating your team on the removal of Bessemer from the list. That's terrific that they've achieved enough progress to come off of the clock. So I just want to celebrate that with you.
Thank you for the acknowledgement.
Yes, I think it's really important and very encouraging. I did want to ask our staff a question, if that's appropriate.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the data, which is kind of exciting, about the percentage of students taking this school city benchmark testing that are showing a dramatic decrease in students not meeting expectations, how do I weigh that when I'm then looking at our, let me go to the right tab, it's tab number 3, the CDE's progress monitoring reports for Risley and Heroes. Can you kind of give me some, I don't know, some reflection on how to weigh that data with what I'm seeing in our benchmark reports?
Yeah, so some of that does come down to a timing issue with that. So the progress monitoring report that you were given was based on 17-18. I believe the Pueblo team was updating you on some of their most current results that they were seeing of the fall of this year. Within that, where they were seeing some more encouraging results on the school city assessment compared to what happened in 17-18. So theirs is more of an updated version from what we had shared in our report.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Madam Chair. So do you use the same benchmark test to measure this progress that the district uses?
Yeah, yes. So we're working with the district, and they're showing us their local, and we're reflecting and talking together about the local data that they're using, as well as we also obviously use the state data that comes out as well.
But you don't have any interim state data?
No. So that's just that once a year dipstick.
So this interim, these interim assessments, what level of confidence do you place in them versus the annual state assessment?
So they have multiple different assessments. I'll say I have some background in them, some more and some than others. I'll say one of the difficulties is the Achievement Network assessments are fantastic as far as really measuring the bar at the same level that students are being asked on state assessments, but they are not meant to be a dipstick of exactly where is a student overall in proficiency. What they are meant to do is test how a student was doing on standards that they've already been taught during that quarter for the specific purpose of reteaching for the teacher to be able to use that data to be able to see and go back and reteach standards that students may have missed. So what that means is we can't take that data and say, oh, this means they're necessarily doing better or worse as far as progress toward the overall, as far as how the state assessment measures those things. So we tried to do the best according to the vendor of looking at how students are doing versus how students did last year versus the national average in that. So it's it's not exactly a correlation within those. So to say that we can say a decrease in does not meet on school city or ANET means automatically, oh, students are going to do better on the state assessment, I don't think we can say that.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at, whether we're doing apples and comparing apples to apples, because I think part of the problem, when I looked at those numbers that were the district reported, it was in the seems too good to be true category, and I went back to my over-reliance. If it seems too good to be true, it's a good chance it is not true. So you wouldn't want to stake your professional reputation that these numbers are showing will be reflected then in the next statewide test.
No, sir. But I also don't have a great background in school city, so actually the district might be able to answer better as far as how school city assessments are or are not correlated to those, because I think that's the one that's more in question.
Well, has there ever been, to your knowledge, some sort of correlation done that's kind of a professional third-party review in other districts that would correlate these two assessments?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Board Member Rankin.
I think I'm going to be the elephant in the room here.
You are.
Thank you. First of all, Superintendent Macaluso, thank you for coming. Thank you for still being the superintendent.
I remember you asked me
I
last
know,
time
I
how
was
long I was
wondering
going to
that.
stay, and
Yeah.
I am happy to report that I'm back, and I hope that I'm staying for a while.
Okay, good. That's what I want to hear. When the last time when you came before us, ANET was selected as the management partner. We went over and over what that meant. That meant management. Now we're saying, well, that was a partnership. That wasn't really a management, and we need another management company. That's very disturbing to me. ANET has not fulfilled the directive by the state board, in my opinion. And that's followed through to Pueblo, and that's followed through these middle schools. I had the same concerns Board Member Durham had about what are these local data scores. And I know you want to show us that you're doing better, so you, in my opinion, you pick the scores of kids that are doing better. But in actuality, I went back to 2004 and looked at the state test scores for Risley for 6, 7, 8, and for Heroes 6, 7, and 8, and every year track that. The scores are abominable. We are failing these students. Let me emphasize that again. We've talked about programs, we've talked about companies, we've talked about management, we've talked about teachers, we've talked about professional development, extra help. What about the students? We should all be appalled at what we're seeing. The highest score between 6, 7, and 8 at Heroes and Risley, 21% proficient. 21%. Although it does go down to 8%, this is startling. This is startling. And it's not that we need to get another 3 years to see it get better. We've got to do something dramatic, and we have to do it now. And it has to involve management coming in and being a manager. That means for 8 years, we've had a management of some sort there. We've had leadership maybe it's better, but it's not working. These students, and I would imagine, I hope in my heart, that the parents are as concerned as I am. I hope the teachers are. We have got to do something to make this better very quickly now. We don't have time. These students don't have time after 8 years, and I mean, back to 2004, wasn't that much better. But we know they can do better. We know we can. We can make it better. Mr. Johnson, have you heard of Lindamood Bell?
Yes, I have.
It was dramatic change, and of all the students in the state of Colorado, it was in Pueblo. It was in Pueblo. It's just beyond me why we don't embrace that program again. That's all I have to say.
Board Member Sheppel?
I just had a
Sorry.
follow-up to that. That's what I was asking the question about this management approach. I mean, what happens in classrooms with kids with great programs that work around a scope and sequence that aligns with the assessment, that helps students learn to think and master content? That's where the action is, really. I mean, now the management approach, depending on exactly what they do and how they interface with teachers who are on the ground, in the trenches, doing the hard work with kids every day, that's what will make things greater for students. Which is why I'm asking exactly what does ANET do and exactly what does it mean to have a more comprehensive management approach, because as Board Member Rankin pointed out, it's about what we're actually teaching kids, how we're interfacing with those students, how we're helping them learn to think and master skills so they can access great content for thought.
Board Member Flores?
I'm just going to ask the obvious. Would it be, I mean, maybe you have the money for 2 management consultants, but is ANET such a priority that you would keep ANET and also another management consultant that would be more effective? Also, I know I was not asked to speak about this, but I am really concerned about those buildings. I mean, as a teacher,
Those are
because
two
of
of
my,
the stronger
excuse me,
buildings.
Excuse me.
You're off
because of-
topic.
I'm
We
not
need to
off
go on.
topic. This is a big problem. 60-year-old buildings that haven't been touched. There's probably asbestos. There's probably, mold in them, and it might be making students sick, and it might be making teachers sick. That really is very concerning. I'm sorry it's not concerning
But
to you.
So, Dr.
Leslie
Flores,
and
if I could just
Hill,
address
here.
that for a moment. Our students are safe.
In
However,
those schools?
in all of our schools, our students are safe. So I want to assure
Okay.
you of that. We are concerned about the level of need in our facilities in terms of the aging buildings, and we are spending too much money we can't buy enough big Band-Aids to put on our buildings.
Well,
And
yeah.
so at a district level, we are really working hard at a comprehensive facilities master plan to address that now and long term. So know that we are addressing, but that
Good.
is a big concern, and it's a big issue in our district. But I want to
is.
assure you that our students are safe.
Okay.
We don't have them in environments that they are breathing in mold or anything like that. So
Okay.
I just want to assure you of that. But
Very
it is
good.
it's a huge concern
It
because
is
it's
a
a drain
huge
on our
concern.
system in terms of the amount of money that we have to spend in repair.
And so back to the question of ANET, which I don't think I allowed you to answer. Would you be willing to bring the other consultant in and get yourself, let ANET go by the wayside?
We would be willing to work with an external management partner to identify if that is a right existing partner for us. There is a need in our school to develop the instruction and the assessment pieces, and so we feel like ANET is of value, but
Right.
certainly we would defer to an external management partner and work collaboratively with them in terms of what their assessment and evaluation is.
Good.
And,
Thank you.
and I would just add to that, that is a question that we are asking when we're having some of these initial discussions. We name up front, we have partnerships with some of these groups. what does that mean to you? Trying to get a sense of whether or not they feel like that's something that they would do. I will say that in a number of cases, the response we sometimes get is, oh yeah, we partner with them in a number of other schools.
What we don't want to create is a conflict. And so we want to make sure that when we engage in this comprehensive management partner, that it is a comprehensive management. This is the end of the road. Our kids
That is
our kids
correct.
deserve our kids deserve better. And so I want to impress upon this board that that we take our leadership roles very seriously, and our kids are a priority, and we are committed to this process, and we are committed to delegating the level of authority that we need to an external management to make the necessary changes, to eliminate barriers, to give it an additional attempt at ensuring that our students are successful.
Right. And given,
Board Member Durham.
I was just going to give my last
Promise?
statement. I promise.
Promise.
So my last statement is that given the success that you've had, I'm glad that you are, thinking along the lines that you've just stated. And I would think that you think that a management help would help. The people who went and did the review think the same. And they also said that it would cause great harm to Pueblo if these two schools were destroyed, and they would be destroyed if we had a charter school brought in. So I just wanted my colleagues to listen to that and hope that they read that in the report. Thank you.
Yes, and I do agree with that, Dr. Flores.
Thank you.
Board Member Goff, do you want to start going around summarizing? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Durham.
Thank you.
My
Just,
apologies.
May I ask the president of the District 60 Board a couple of questions?
Sure, President Clemente.
You heard your superintendent say that, first of all, I presume that only the board can sign and approve contracts with the external management organization. You heard your superintendent state that there would be clear and unambiguous language surrendering authority over those personnel decisions relative to the at-will employees in those schools, and consistent with your ability under the innovation agreements to reassign people. Is that you believe is that your position? Do you think that's the position of the majority of the board, if you want to try and guess?
Yes.
And then secondly, since we're now past Halloween, what is the significant fear of a charter school? I mean, is it ghosts and goblins, or exactly? It would appear that about the only change again in a charter school is that the staffing at all levels is a little more, you can be a little more flexible in how you staff. Other than that, I mean, there are a number of waivers, many of which are present with innovation districts or innovation schools. But so is it the fear that is it the staffing issue that creates the ghosts and goblins, or is it something else?
In my experience, and I think in the experience of many districts across the state, when charter schools come in, they displace the students who attend those buildings, and that's what we do not want to see happen. Our work and our focus is on the success of those students, and we'd like to bring in a management partner and give that management partner the necessary flexibility and decision-making capacity to help our students' success, to be successful, not to displace them and bring in other students.
Mm-hmm.
Am I confused? I didn't believe charters could reject students.
They do that in Denver.
Yes, they can.
On an
they
admission
have,
criteria?
Yes. Many of them have either lotteries probably the most.
Well, that's if they have more
The most-
applicants than they have spaces. That's not an admission, criteria. I mean, they don't test. At least my understanding is that, they don't do ability testing or that sort of thing.
So if I could respond, if I could just chime in, I think sometimes we create institutional inequities by just the processes that we put in place. So although there are sometimes that they wouldn't be able to deny a student, they put barriers in place such as an application process. So students that are high poverty or dealing with other issues maybe don't have the resources to engage in that application process, or they can put stipulations like particular uniforms, or that you need to provide your own transportation. Those things create denial of access for students that are in high poverty.
Absolutely.
Well, it's the districts that refuse to provide the transportation. That's something you could choose to do if you wanted to, a charter. Shouldn't be a problem for your in-district students. So, I mean, these are pretty thin, in my view, pretty thin. They don't constitute the, at least I can't get to the level of fear that is being displayed by the district. And I think, to correct the record, I think the recommendation on Risley was that it was carefully considered and ultimately rejected, but I don't think there was a conclusion that the charter was a bad idea for that particular school, if I have the two. Hope I didn't confuse the
That's
two.
the one that has the
I would say that it was rejected on the basis that even the state panel review members felt that it would further disenfranchise those students that are demonstrating the highest need in terms of those students that are on an IEP.
Well, maybe I can find the exact quote. I'll try and go back and look, but I don't.
Let me give you a minute to do that, Mr.
Don't
Durham,
think
and
that
I'll let
was it.
Ms.
Thank you, Madam
Board
Chair.
Member Rankin.
Ms. Tollison, can you make a comment on that as far as legally? I thought a charter school would be a charter school in a middle school confine in this particular situation, or is it just a general charter school? I'm confused on that. Do you know what?
Well, if I may speak to a couple of the things that have come up, certainly, and I know that there are perhaps concerns born of practices in certain places, and we've heard some of that here, but as a statutory matter, charter schools are considered public schools of the district. The things that make, the primary thing that makes them unique is they're operated very autonomously under a contract with the local board. But
They're
other than
private.
that, they're subject to the same guidelines regarding the very narrow circumstances under which you can deny admission. It is true that many of them do not provide transportation, but they can do so under contract with the district that authorizes them, or some of the larger ones actually have their own transportation plans. So those are, in terms of grade configuration, that's another thing that's just established by the terms of the relationship with the district. Some charters are elementary, some are middle, and it's set forth in their charter contract.
But my thought is, if it was in one of these middle schools, it would still be the same local school and the same kids in that school.
Functionally, when you look at the language, I know there's been discussion of management partnership, but actually that's the language from the district statute. The language from the statute regarding external management for an individual school is external management, either partial or whole, by an entity other than the district. So it's really not significantly distinguishable as a statutory matter. I understand there's very different sort of emotional responses to the terminology, but so
There's
that's
finances.
kind of a long.
But in this statute, it applies differently in this situation than it would in any other type of district situation. Okay.
Did you find it, Mr. Durham?
I did.
Please go ahead.
It's a little inconsistent, but I'll read the
page are you
first
on?
paragraph and then the first sentence of the second paragraph. But State Review Panel strongly considered this option because it would provide the school more autonomy to implement academic programs specific to the needs of the students of the school without having to implement state mandates, and would provide increased flexibility with recruiting and retaining staff. However, the State Review Panel is recommending an additional management entity in addition to ANET. And then you get down to the next paragraph. Further conversion to a charter school would be difficult to meet the specific needs of the community that include a high level of poverty, students with disabilities and social emotional needs. So, you know, there are plenty of charter schools that serve this particular demographic quite successfully. So, I guess, you know, they think it's a good idea for a whole bunch of reasons, but then reach a slightly different conclusion. But there are clearly some advantages to this management structure. I don't think there's any question about that. And then you can have a debate in which reasonable people will disagree, but I think the evidence is clear. Charter schools, on average, produce a slightly better result with disadvantaged students than do traditional public classrooms.
They don't take them.
That's evident. I mean, there's
Mr.
plenty of evidence to that.
Mr. Durham, they don't take them. That's
course
what
they do.
happens.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there, guys.
I'd like to make a motion.
There are no motions at this time. We are going down the table as soon as we get started to,
I'm not ready. I will just go the other way.
I mean,
we need to kind of wrap this up because
Yeah.
we have another hearing. Board Member Sheffel, are you ready? Just
Sure.
where you are in
Well, I
general.
just would, again, appreciate all the presentations and thoughts. I also would say it's great that Bessemer has made great progress. That's encouraging. And as far as these other schools, I just question the management approach as really being what you need. It might be. And the whole hiring, firing piece, I mean, is part of that, and making sure you have the right people in the classroom. Teachers make the biggest difference. I'm sure you have wonderful teachers, and I guess my question is this management approach really what is going to help the students in Pueblo at these schools? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm not convinced, based on how you've been speaking about it, that it really is touching the basics of instruction and data and progress monitoring and close attention to instructional minutes and grouping and professional development for teachers and deep knowledge of how to create mastery of skills so that students have access to content and use of technology, and all those pieces make for great instruction that translates into test scores. We don't have education so we can have great test scores. You know, that's kind of a byproduct of it. So I just appreciate what you're doing. I think we need to continue to think on it, and I don't know that I'm struggling with what the best solution is for the students in Pueblo at these schools. Thank you.
So I think I'll wrap up by touching once again on kind of the line of questions that Mr. Durham had, knowing that authority and responsibility kind of go together. It would help me to know if I have kind of a clear picture of what goes in the bubble of responsibility and authority for the management entity. I'm struggling with the use of the word partner because a partner is someone that you share 50-50 with, which means when push comes to shove, it's likely your superintendent or your board that still has that 50.5% or gets that controlling vote. And knowing that in the event that there ever were to be a charter application, that certainly does go back to your locally elected board. What does the bubble that contains the authority and responsibility for the management entity look like? It'll help me to just kind of have a clear feeling about what your vision is in that regard.
Sure. So I think that those elements in the bubble are those elements that were identified in the state panel review. We agree with most of them. So it is around hiring and staffing and instruction and so forth. The one that I'm not clear, I'll be perfectly honest with you, the one that I'm not clear about what it looks like is finance. Finance was listed in the state panel review. I don't know what that looks like in terms of an external management and our district, because we don't have an open checkbook. And so I would need a little more clarification around finances.
And that's because that's not something that you have full control over.
Right.
The limits of your budget
Right.
are the limits of your budget.
Exactly.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Board Member Rankin?
Going back to the state review panel, I think they said that there are 2 content areas of coaching with ANET. It's reading and math, and there are other subject area teachers that wanted to also have some coaching. And I worry about lessening the emphasis on the things that are going to get you out of turnaround and priority improvement. I think however we can get the students out of there, and I don't know, I just kind of have my preference to reading, but I know you like math better. But I think they're both important in this overall raising the students' achievement rates. And I have to say, I really wish you all the luck, because it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone.
Thank you.
Board Member Flores, even though you said your last piece a little while ago, I'm going to give you
I'm
one more
sorry?
shot. You said the last time you were done. Go ahead.
Well,
One more
that-
short.
That was for that paragraph.
Oh, my.
I'm sorry. It wasn't my essay, okay? So here
And there's no time for an essay.
That's right. I've already
I want a
given
short
most of my
synopsis.
essay. So I really do believe that, given Pueblo, and I've been to Pueblo, and I know that it's a tight-knit community, and I know that it's difficult to attract teachers. In fact, they don't have enough teachers, and that's been a big problem. So I just can't see how, we're pushing them from what I hear from some of you into what the report has found out, that, they should not, we shouldn't destroy those communities, and that they would do well to get a partner that is going to help them. They already reassured us, and that they've been thinking about that if ANET is not, the one, then they're going to do something about that, and that they have limited resources and such. So I really do believe that they're on the right path. They've made improvements, and this is improvements in just a short, limited number of, is it a half a year or a year? And this is even with leadership, that new leadership and such. So I really do believe that we need to listen to what the school district is asking for and what was recommended by the review panel, and that is to go with an external management.
Board Member Durham.
This is what I read loud and clear from all the documents.
I have no further
Thank you.
comments.
Okay. Are we ready?
Well, you don't have to be asking me if I'm ready. I appreciate, always appreciate, and especially today, you all for coming and presenting and telling us more of your story. I agree with the accolades necessary and called for with Bessemer, and I remember back when Bessemer background was the talk of the state, really, and to see it having come full circle is good and healthy. I do know that your whole community is hard at work, kind of reinventing, rebirthing some communication and good connections that are being made down there, and I encourage that continuing. I'm rooting for districts when they're in the middle of really making great effort to come together and start moving ahead in a good way. And I trust that that's going to be key in however your entire district sets about improving and moving ahead. And so I would encourage, and I do agree with the external idea, with great respect for the questions that were asked and what kinds of expectations you all should get fulfilled by an agreement like that. But I would also say that as we all learn more and we all get, we have all beefed up our own resolve and our own courage about talking the truth, and how we've got to face some really tough stuff, and that we do that at our best when we have considered a lot of points of view and taken just enough time. That's the hard part right now, a balance of time. How much can we afford but as much as possible, to make sure that everybody's got their contribution made to that conversation, and communication and transparency and honesty, and just the courage to say we can work together, and we have to work together, and we can get this done. So again, thank you very much, all of you, for just being there for your students, for your kids and their families.
Thank you, Board Member Goff.
Thank you.
I just keep wondering how much more time we have. This is what worries me the most. I don't disrespect your recommendation, but it's kicking the can down the road yet again. And I'm thinking about the kids. I'm thinking about the pictures of those kids, and they're happy and they're smiling. There are a whole bunch of kids that aren't graduating in your district, or there are kids that are graduating who really aren't ready for life. So let me just say a couple of things. One, if you have students in your district who are in a charter school, they are still your kids. They are still our kids, our 950,000 kids. In my community, there are 5 charter schools. They are still seen as our students. So please don't look at them as them rather than ours. They continue to be our kids, and your board still has a responsibility for those students. It's just a different structure. So I hope you'll realize that, or think about it that way, because it's really important.
Absolutely, we do hold that core value, and I hope that nothing that I have said gave you that impression that we do not believe that those are our kids. Those are absolutely our kids in our entire community.
Good. And they can be poor kids in a successful
Absolutely.
charter school. Question I didn't ask you, and we're actually supposed to be wrapping up, but I don't know how much time. I guess it's a minimum of 2 years before you come back to us, but believe me, if you come back in 2 years and things aren't rocking in Pueblo, this board has got to do something more dramatic.
We won't have a choice.
We just don't have a choice not to. And I'm not very comfortable necessarily in going forward with your recommendation. I kind of think we should do something a little more dramatic. But I do recognize that you have seen some progress, and depending on who you hire, and I hope our staff can give us maybe some input on their thoughts about who you hire and what the contract says and how much authority you give to them. It might be worth more, 1 or 2 more years. But I confess it does worry me a lot.
Thank you.
So I guess I want to say a couple more things. Thank you, district staff and partners. Please know that we recognize how hard you do work. It's just that we haven't got the right tools in the tool chest quite yet, and that's what we're looking for. And in our capacity, the tools that we have at our disposal are really blunt, as I said earlier today. So no matter what we decide, it nevertheless is up to you to have that help you, but that you're still doing the hard pushing and the hard work. And I want to know the community to know that we've heard loud and clear that there is a certain amount of support, more support than we've heard earlier today, that you've got some really good programs that are appreciated in your community, and hopefully they're going to help you to push you all forward. We're probably going to talk about this again later this afternoon. I'm not sure what time. We're all wishing it's at 5, but it's probably between 5 and 6. And then probably tomorrow. We've allowed more time so that we can sort of search out what we're comfortable with, because we've got several alternatives. I think that what I heard from my colleagues is that we've eliminated the first option, which was to keep things the way they are. So you can anticipate there'll be some kind of a change that we're going to recommend. And I sincerely thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Is your deliberation from 5 to is
Well,
that open
we
to the
have-
public?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's open to the public, but we have a hearing or two, a report or two. We have another exec session. It does not relate to this, but exec session.
Okay.
And then when we come out of exec session, depending on how long that takes, we'll be back on board for as long as we're upright for today. And then we'll start again tomorrow. And I believe it's at 10 o'clock tomorrow. That will be
11 to
at
12.
11 to 12, that we'll be discussing this again. And of course, feel free to come. I'm sorry you have to come such a long way.
No problem. Thank you.
conversation.
Busy kept saying we don't need to hurry up, we don't need to hurry up.
Well, let's not get carried away with what I said. Katie?
I'm always ready to
I know. It was just my tap. Third time.
We're on 13?
Yes.
Oh, Cassie, okay. Colorado State Board of Education will now conduct a public rulemaking hearing for the rules for the administration of medications. State Board voted to approve the notice of rulemaking at its September 12, 2018 board meeting. A hearing to promulgate these rules was made known through the publication of a public notice on October 10, 2018, through the Colorado Register, and by State Board notice on November 7, 2018. State Board is authorized to promulgate these rules pursuant to 22-2-1071C CRS. Commissioner, is staff prepared to provide an overview?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll turn this over to Misty Roosvin, and she's our Executive Director of Student Pathways. Always gets to talk to us about this.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthus, and good afternoon, members of the board. Madam Chair, I know you've had a fairly long day.
Nah.
So I'm with you for the next 3 items, so I'll try to move through these as efficiently as possible. So with the administration of medications, today is the hearing. I'll just give you a brief reminder about the rules that you have in front of you today and where these changes came from. Outline the 2 very brief comments that we've received on these. And then I believe we have 1 person for public comment. Is that accurate, Madam Chair? Correct. Great. So if you'll turn your attention to the 5 documents that you have in front of you, you have a memo outlining the needs and events that prompted today's rulemaking, which are two bills that require changes to these rules, which we'll discuss, a red line copy of the suggested changes to the rules, a clean copy of the suggested rules, a crosswalk of rules, and the comments response. We did receive 1 comment from CEA this week, and I believe they're also here to comment, that had 8 questions. So that was received on Monday, so I apologize that you're just getting that now, I believe, or received that early this morning. So we'll talk about that a bit. I will rely heavily on our Assistant Madam Attorney General to my left for her expertise. I believe you also received a memo with some of the guidance that was addressing your questions from the September notice of rulemaking. And specifically, the 2 bills that prompted these changes. So passage of House Bill 18-1286 and House Bill 16-1373. As a reminder, House Bill 16-1373 directs school districts to adopt policies regarding the administration of medical marijuana by a primary caregiver to students with medical marijuana registry cards. You all had asked in the September notice of rulemaking how a student receives a recommendation. I believe you received a memo from the Attorney General's office outlining that information. And then the second bill is House Bill 1286, which requires this body, all of you, the State Board, to establish the written documentation required should a district choose to allow school personnel to administer medical marijuana to a student. So there's 3 changes that we talked about at the notice of rulemaking. 1 is the change for a title, which Ms. Vice Chair Rankin recommended, and so that has been streamlined to administration of medications. Also, per the page 6 is the change made by House Bill 16-1373. So if you'll follow me to page 6 on the red line version of your rules. This is a straight lift from statute. So we have not made any additional recommendations or changes. I want to point out specifically that in 7.06B, a school district board of education or charter may adopt policies regarding who may act as a primary caregiver, and it is also optional and voluntary for any staff to choose to do this. So I know we've received several questions along the way to that nature, and I want to make sure to point that out. So also the next change is from House Bill 1286, and that's the final and third change So if you'll follow me to section 8.0, which is on page 7. This bill requires a state board to establish written documentation required if a school district chooses to allow school personnel to administer medical marijuana to a student. This language is also directly from Colorado law, with the exception of the clarification requested by Board Member Durham to note that there is not a requirement for a school district to adopt a policy, nor can a school district require personnel to possess or administer medical marijuana. So with that, that's a reminder of what is new in the rules in front of you and the technical change of the title itself.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, thank you.
Cassie Harrelson? Where are you? Oh, you're hiding.
Okay, so as earlier you guys saw, I'm going to make some remarks on behalf of Kevin Vick, the Vice President of the
Oh, that's
Colorado
right.
Education Association. So Madam Chair, members of the board, and Commissioner Anthus, on behalf of Kevin Vick and the Colorado Education Association, representing over 37,000 educators in Colorado, including many nurses and other healthcare personnel in schools. I'm here today to ask that you delay the rulemaking process on the administration of medical marijuana until some vital concerns can be addressed. Specifically, we are asking that adequate consultation with the various medical practitioner boards, for example, the Nurse Practitioner Board, is done. Even though we have received a reply from the state's Attorney General's office, it failed to adequately address some key concerns regarding the delegation of administering medical marijuana by a school nurse. Since most schools do not have a nurse in the building on a daily basis, most of the administration of medicines is done by a health tech. For example, in my home district of Colorado Springs, District 11, historically we have employed less than 12 nurses district-wide for a student population of over 25,000. Consequently, these health techs are usually a designated front office person with little to no medical training and are the ones actually giving medicine to students. In all cases, when a health tech is delegated to give medicine to a student, it is documented in a specific health care plan. The current draft of the rules you are considering makes no such requirement. Since marijuana is considered a controlled substance according to state and federal law, there are other concerns of criminal liability and licensing issues that have not been addressed in the rules as well for nurses and other healthcare school personnel. This is another reason why you ask to seek more information from these licensing boards. Again, we are simply asking you to delay the rulemaking process until these important concerns can be addressed.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who came to speak to this topic? Do you have comments to address the concerns that were, I guess they're in this stuff that we haven't read?
Certainly. So I want to be sensitive to the fact that you all just received
Thank you.
the response. So it is 4 pages long, I want to acknowledge and recognize, and there are a few themes in the response and the information that CEA and the questions that CEA provided. I think the themes are around delegation of nurses and what is the ability for nurses to delegate. So I'm happy to address that, which is also addressed in the document. And I'll point out also where these things are addressed in the document in front of you. Also, the healthcare plan piece and what that looks like. I'll also rely on Ms. Ellison for a little information, for a little more information, as well as the licensing piece, because this is guidance that we have received from the Attorney General's office and staff's interpretation of what that looks like. So starting with the delegation of nurses. So if you'll go to page 3, number 5. Question 5 says, how will administering personnel be properly trained in accordance with state law, with standards required by law? So one of the things that I've learned in this process and discussion is that per federal law, a nurse cannot deem the administration of medical marijuana to be within their scope of practice. and therefore training and delegation are not required. So essentially, a school nurse would not be able to delegate, right, the responsibility because it's not considered within their scope of practice, and that essentially this is a local control district decision of how they might do this. If it's helpful, one of the things that we have heard from school districts is that many school districts are not planning on having a policy. There is only one school district that we're aware of that does currently have a policy, and that is the school district from which the parent that initiated this legislation resides.
And which district is that?
I believe it's Eagle County.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Eagle.
Eagle, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Might not close enough. My apologies.
Can you entertain a question?
So is that right, though, because this one comment on page 3 of the crosswalk of rule to statute says that a school district or charter may not deny eligibility to attend school to a student who holds a valid recommendation for medical marijuana. So the point is, as you have more students who have a valid, they have a prescription for medical marijuana, the schools are going to have to have a policy. So the fact that the school, only one district has one, isn't that just a function of the fact that this whole thing hasn't gained enough momentum yet so that more students have a recommendation for medical marijuana, so that more districts will have a policy?
Madam Chair, would you like me to address that? So I'm happy to turn to my Attorney General partner. My understanding is that how the statute is directing school districts is that it is absolutely at their discretion and their decision if they choose to have a policy, and up to their local board. And in order to then have a student with a medical marijuana recommendation have that administration happening during school, the first step is that a local school board would need to have a policy in place. Is that accurate?
And if they don't, parents administer? I mean, I'm trying to get the
Yep.
scenario.
Parents or guardian.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
correct.
sort of the historical pathway was that there were students with medical marijuana recommendations. Schools absolutely weren't allowing marijuana on campus in any form, and so parents were having to come, check their child out of school, administer it off campus, and return their child. Citing that as a burden, we saw Jack's Law passed in 2016, which obligated school districts to allow that parent or adult caregiver to come on campus and administer to their own child. This is, and that was a mandate from the General Assembly. This one opened up a sort of permissive window that said if a school district wants to adopt a policy allowing its own staff people, and it's not nursing, it's whoever the school district's policy designates as somebody who can administer, that they can do that with certain documentation. So, and it is voluntary on the part of school districts, and even beyond that, it's got some language in it making it voluntary on the part of staff, that they can't be compelled to administer it should they choose not to, in part because of the particularly unique legal status. Although it is not a controlled substance under state law, it is a controlled substance under federal law.
Board Member McClellan.
Because this creates an intersection between, well, it's possible for a school district to set forth a policy that would place an individual employee in a position where they have to look like the bad guy if they're the only one stepping on the brakes and saying no when their license is on the line. Is there any downside to us tabling this to a date certain so that we can hear from the nurse practitioner board so that they can weigh in on this? I'm thinking about cases where you might have a high school in a geographically isolated location where a school board goes ahead and crafts a policy that says we have no problem with it, and then the community's expectation is set, and then when they can't have that individual employee basically complying with the community's desires for them to administer a controlled, scheduled substance that's not federally legal, it may place pressure on, even if they're not being compelled by their employer to do it, it places them kind of in the crosshairs, and I think it's worth hearing from them for that reason.
What are you
because
gonna hear? What are you gonna hear?
I think they have a right to sound off about the concern about the pressure this may put on individual employees where their license is on the line.
Your license isn't on the line.
So I guess my question is there a downside for us to delaying so that we can hear from the nurse practitioner board? Or do we have to pass this today for some reason?
No.
So where you are in the process, if that's helpful, is this is the first hearing. So if you all choose to adopt this, it would need to be unanimous. So it's absolutely up to you all what you would like to do today. If you'd like to take a vote, table, what have you. So I would like to turn your attention to page 4 on the comments response and question 8, because I believe it does address some of the concerns that you're bringing up specifically.
I apologize. I've been rifling through. That's
No
the
worries.
one
Oh.
document I don't seem to have a copy of, and I sincerely apologize. Oh, thank you very much.
So specifically in regard to licensure, it is CDE staff understanding that administration of medical marijuana by school personnel under the House Bill 18-1286 would not result in a licensing liability. There's a specific provision within the bill that provides a safe harbor with regard to state criminal law, which would allow such school personnel to administer medical marijuana without fear of state prosecution. Without a criminal charge, CDE and the state board are not obligated to act against a license. A district must adopt a policy to allow for such administration by school personnel, and the school must have the appropriate written documentation on file. It's when these criteria are not met or followed that a school personnel administering or possessing medical marijuana on school grounds would be potentially liable for licensing action, civil litigation, criminal prosecution, et cetera. So that gives you a sense of where this is.
And I apologize, but I am not familiar with the terms that that a nurse practitioner must comply with in order to maintain their license in good standing. I understand that we may not go after them and that the state of Colorado might not necessarily, but I don't know whether this safe harbor protects specifically their license. And I apologize, maybe that's a question for Ms. Tollison.
Well, a couple of thoughts. I mean, we have been in touch with the folks in our office that represent medical licensing boards and the Department of Health that administers the registry of recommendations, because I think everybody has struggled with this. The practical reality is that it's a strange bird, right? Because it's not considered a medicine by law, so administration of it is neither the practice of medicine nor nursing, yet to get a recommendation, and it's called a recommendation for and not a prescription, for specific legal reasons, you have to have a medical license, right? It's all, but think of it, even for adults with a medical marijuana recommendation, they go to a dispensary where it's where it's sold to you by a bud tender, not by a pharmacist, right? It is a hybrid sort of structure that requires a level of medical authorization up front and then is considered sort of a legal nothingness under state law thereafter. And I understand it's very stressful for people in different professions. I think that's why we saw the Colorado Association of School Boards opposed to this bill at the legislature, because districts were having some of the same anxiety you did, saying, we understand there's statutory protections about it's not a state crime, it's, you know, there's safe harbor provisions, but gee, it's still federally illegal. So, but when a lot of that ship has already sailed, when the legislature said, we're going to at least empower districts to do this, and the limited role for the state board is to say, what documentation should a family have on file with the school for districts, should they so choose to authorize that on-campus administration by staff?
Yeah. Please, go ahead.
I apologize. I don't want to be the one standing on the break here, and I certainly do have sympathy for families who are trying to control, for example, seizure disorders for their children. I'm just wondering if this doesn't, if it wouldn't be right to maybe allow the nurse practitioner board to at least be able to weigh in on this. I'd be more comfortable giving them a chance to at least do that, even if our ability to offer them further protection may be limited.
You know, I'm letting her finish. Now,
Okay. Thank you. I just want to say that, you know, we may be putting on too much. Because I have this problem, you know, especially my skin, with heat and inflammation, I've been using a steroid cream for a long time. So I've been looking for a specialist, such as a new person who can look at this. And I talked to one at the University of Colorado in Boulder. He informed me that there are like 400 properties in marijuana. Most of them are not opioid. So they are really doing research with marijuana for anti-inflammatory diseases. So, I mean, these kids may not be able to breathe, and the thing that they've taken from marijuana is not the opioid stuff, but the inflammation property that it helps. Not cures, but it helps. So, you know, we have to think about what research is out there and not think about marijuana as just an opioid thing. I mean, it has many other properties. Think about what we just did in Colorado. We passed, meaning we voted for a law to grow hemp, to allow farmers to grow hemp in our state. So, I mean, that's another use for marijuana. But think of having 400 different properties that the research has found, and most of them are not dealing with opioid, but, you know, with such things as anti-inflammation and such. So we have to think about the science in what marijuana can do. And I'm not for, you know, I'm not a person that leaving here, I'm going to go to one of those places and you know, spend my money on marijuana. I just don't want you to think that. But I do read about the research and this new dermatologist who is doing work in this area, and I'm you know, I kind of feeling very positive about it, and hope that, you know, more gains are made in this area.
Board Member Rankin.
Thank you for listening.
I think that the law is already out there. I think our job right now is rulemaking. And I believe what we just talked about was that if a nurse practitioner did not want to be the person giving it, they could just say no.
Yep.
Is that not right?
That is
Ms.
what the
Toles?
statute provides, yeah.
So it's not like anybody's being forced to do anything. And I see no reason with this, but I also have a question. Can I do a follow-up?
Yeah.
If a let's say a principal administrator, he talks to a teacher and a teacher says yes, they would do it, they have no problem with it, do you need to have a couple so that if that teacher's out sick or you know, and if the high school basketball team or football team is going somewhere, is a personnel person could be a bus driver or a coach? Is that true? I see the definition of
Yes, I believe the definition is broad, and that's something we could certainly add as a point of clarification in the rules if you think that's helpful.
I don't think it is, I think it's broad enough as it is, but I was just wondering if you had any input on that. And I say local control, leave it up to that superintendent or principal or however the school wants to do it. But anyone can say no, they don't want to dispense it and not be in any trouble for that.
That's correct.
Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start by saying that I have a financial interest in a company that produces non-psychotropic products from hemp, and I think, so just to explain the difference, the anti-seizure medication has been approved by the FDA and actually can be prescribed by a physician because it doesn't contain any THC, so there's no psychotropic properties. So the bill, I think in its present form, doesn't impact anything for which an FDA prescription can be written, because it's not illegal under state or federal law, and it's not a class 1 because it doesn't contain any THC. So we're now, the only thing we're dealing with is something that really does contain the psychotropic properties of marijuana, which somehow contains the THC molecule. And I think we've done everything we can to shield employees from the violation, because I don't think it wasn't the intent of the legislature to force anybody to violate the law. And I think we took some extra steps in the rules to say no one else has to violate the law either. If the board somehow, and there may be a few boards who will somehow want this a psychotropic product administered, nobody has to do it, and if they do it at their own risk. And I think for a nurse, there may be some licensure risk down the road, particularly if they go to another state and get asked the question. So I think the rules are in pretty good shape in terms of we've done everything we can to shield every school district employee, and if there's something else we could do, I'd certainly be in favor of doing it, but I don't, because I don't think we ought to. I mean, I didn't support this statute. I think the board took a position against it as well. But nonetheless, here we are, and so I think we've done the best we can. And I don't know, I mean, I don't mind waiting a month. I don't think it matters too much one way or the other. But I don't think there's any comment that anybody can make. I mean, I guess we could strengthen the language a little bit, in making it clear that a district may not penalize an employee for refusal or something like that. We might, and that might be okay. I'd be happy to offer that as an amendment if appropriate. But you know, we've said they can't force them. Maybe we ought to go one step farther and say they can't in any way penalize. That'd be one change, but give it a month, see what happens. But I think as a practical matter, we've done about everything we can do.
Sorry. Tell me what it is that you want to hear, so that we understand, please.
I think it would be reasonable to give that board a chance to weigh in.
Now, do you know if didn't they weigh in?
They did.
They did weigh in.
I think the board already has. The Board of Nursing has took a position against
The nurse
bill.
practitioners?
I think the Board of Nursing takes care of the nurse practitioners, I believe. I think they're licensed under the Board of Nursing.
If I understood the request
Are they?
correctly, it was
Anybody
a
know?
request for a delay so that the nurse practitioners could weigh in through their professional association, which is going to meet on this particular issue, if I understood correctly. Perhaps I misunderstood, but that was my understanding. If there's not a legal...
I don't think they're licensed by a separate board. They may be, but I sincerely doubt it.
Board Member Goff?
Oh my gosh, sorry. If I remember correctly, and I could probably find some time to look it up, I believe the nurse practitioners was part of the testimony when this bill was in the House. And even before that, the Nurses Association, which our staff members are also represented and participated, were informative of us when we were talking about this bill. And another thing, we opposed it early for every reason that we did was related to personnel issues. And it was, that was relayed to the sponsors, and they weren't real happy, but as things happen, bills proceed, and it passed and so forth. But part of the consideration of the state board's view that was put into the bill in the end was this consideration and other box, picking up the box to make sure that we had some of that stuff covered sufficiently. And I would be happy to look that up, but I believe that voice has been included, and that's where we are. Yeah, but I do have a question. In the future, I guess, people have trouble separating what our legislative role is often from, agency, another agency. But, I don't know, I wouldn't foresee, I don't know how to foresee, whether we've got any way that coming up. It never turned on.
I think you turned it on and then turned it off.
No,
So
it
you
was,
had green lights on.
yeah, I
So you just
know.
turned it. It wasn't on.
Now we
It
can-
was, but, okay. I'm done.
Perfect.
No, I hope you heard me enough to know what I was talking about, but, that's interesting, and that the nurses, I guess another concern I would have, perhaps, we should think about, if I'm understanding this right, there is no requirement that a district has a policy for administering any of these medications?
Correct.
For administering medical marijuana.
Oh, just marijuana.
They should have, they
But
should have
yeah,
policies
okay,
for things
thank
like
you. I needed
Tylenol
that.
and other things,
I
yeah.
needed that reinforcement, because for a minute I thought, what happened to our policy requirement that there be a policy for administering epinephrine and
Correct.
anaphylactics and all those things? So,
Yep. Those exist at the local level.
Board Member Durham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just happy we have a policy to have a policy, but.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that smile on your face. This is not good.
But no, I think it's, if we're gonna lay this over, I only have one other question, and that is, the term reasonable accommodation is used in here. It's not defined. Would it be helpful to try and define it in a way that might shield some of our school districts from liability if they, is there a way to define it in a practical way that would provide some protections to districts? Because I think it's kind of an amorphous term, and if we're gonna try and shield our districts from litigation, it might, if we come up with a good practical definition of reasonable accommodation, might help them. So I don't have one, by the way, so
So it's
I.
district and personnel that we're worried about.
Yes.
District and personnel.
Go ahead, Ms. Ruther.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I've heard so far is that if you all choose to vote today, certainly that's up to you. Just a reminder that it does need to be unanimous. That's where you land today. And certainly we're not under any type of time pressure, so this is absolutely up to you. The few things that I've heard from several members that you'd like us to consider and add is the language, Madam Vice Chair, around a district may not penalize, right? So adding that information. And then per Board Member Durham's request, then defining reasonable accommodation. So
Only
within
if
that,
that's practical to do,
Okay.
and I don't know that it is.
and then we'll confer with our Attorney General friends here. Additionally, to answer your question specifically, Board Member McClellan, we did connect with the nursing board and the professional association with school nurses. They did oppose, as Board Member Goff had mentioned, this bill originally, and nurses were essentially taken out. They were once in this bill and they were taken out. So there's multiple layers of opposition from the nursing contingent, and that continues.
Board Member Jeff.
It sounds like the context for this was that parents wanted to be able to have the convenience of schools administering this, if necessary. Was there also concern by parents where they did not want this administered at school? And I'm just referring to the stakeholder feedback on page 2 that said, why didn't the rule require that a proper health care plan approved by a medical professional be in place prior to the delegation? And then the end of the response is something about including input from parents or legal guardians. I mean, so this thing about a healthcare plan, was there concern, is there concern behind that language that parents felt like, I'm concerned that my child would be administered this and I don't want that? And so is there a healthcare plan that has this inside of it? And is input from the parents an issue? Would parents want to be signing off on something like that? I mean, I was trying to figure out who cares about this. Sounds like I'm asking.
Thank you, Dr. Shuffle. Madam Chair, would you like me to address that? So you're absolutely correct. As part of the rules that you all are adopting, and part of what you all are being asked to do is absolutely that, a requirement, excuse me, that parents must sign off as part of this process, and have that assurance that, you know, the first step is that the local school board must have a policy and then someone to administer it, or have the parent come in and do that. And then, before that, the form that would be created, which is what you all are outlining, and one of those requirements is parent signature and sign off, definitely.
Okay, good, thank you.
Do you want to put off a vote till next time? Board Member Rankin?
I just was wondering, Ms. Ruthven, is the department going to devise a form that is usable, or can that be a possibility? We've got a lot of small districts, and if everyone's doing their own form legally, I think it could
Great
deal.
idea.
And if we had an example that is available to all the superintendents, or I don't know if you even put it on on the website somewhere, it sure would be easier for the smaller districts to do something that's legal.
We can create an example.
Right,
Yeah,
there's
an
no reason.
example.
And it would just be that it would need to be a sample, because of course, when we try to mandate the use of a form, we get the pushback,
No,
you have the direction.
I don't want, I don't want a mandate. I just want for, when they call
sample.
and say, I think it's only one form that is signed between the person that is authorized to give it and the parent. I think that, I don't know if it's between the superintendent, I don't know how
Right.
that's
Board.
worded.
It might be the board.
But
There's a form that exists already from the Department of Health that reflects what the physicians sign off on, and the family brings to the school. But in terms of the form that the parents will be signing
with the school.
with the school, a
That's what
sample
I'm
could be
look-
included with the rules, yes.
That's
She's
what
not
I would
only
like to see.
cute, she's smart.
Can you make a motion?
I thought we were not going to vote tonight.
Yes.
Is custody an issue too, where you've got both parents, but one parent may have custody, or they may have shared custody or whatever? I mean, who signs that? Again, I'm trying to get at underneath it, who cares about this? Has there been any feedback from parents where they're concerned about, one parent thinks it's okay for a student they sign off on this and the other doesn't? Is there some way to resolve that?
That's a
Looking to see if it addresses that. We could maybe add custodial language, something about custodial parent, if that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, I think that's great, thank you.
Go ahead. You sure you want to make a motion?
To table.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
move to lay this over till the December meeting.
No,
Madam
January.
Chair. Madam
Oh,
Chair.
December.
We may not meet in December.
Oh, I'm gonna miss it.
Yeah, I think December's good.
You can
Yeah.
phone
Okay.
in December. Don't
Well,
push my button.
we can do this by
friend.
phone.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to do this by phone.
Oh, okay.
I think it's really clear that we don't want to do this one by phone. So
Madam Chair, may I just, one piece I would like to clarify is that if the board doesn't vote on this, it automatically would be laid over, so you don't have to vote to table this. It would just be if it's not a unanimous vote, then we'll just hold it. So, because we have the abridged meeting in December, holding just an action item on this, there wouldn't be a hearing. Folks can still submit written public comment, but we wouldn't have a hearing. It would just be an action item that you all can vote on, and then it can.
is it important to you to do it in December?
I would prefer that we stick with January, just to stick to our
January.
December.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we can table it until
Well,
January.
Let me ask
Yes,
if I can ask our legal counsel, can we lay this,
Till January?
can we lay it over till January?
Yes, you
Okay.
can.
It's
Right.
still within the
And
180
Would it be a
days
hardship
that it needs to
for
be
the
approved.
family?
Technically, the way the statute is worded, that the schools aren't supposed to start administering it until the family has on file with them a form with the information required by the state board, whether the one district that we've heard that's even adopted a policy, because that's the first step, right? Whether that is even happening, I suppose it's possible that districts would hold a family at bay and say, we don't have instructions from the state
Yeah,
board.
sure.
We've heard nothing, that's kind of a
Whole district.
hypothetical. We haven't heard
Yeah.
of that happening, but I guess it's possible.
Yes.
I like busy idea about just getting it out there, that if people want to give, give their idea or whatever, that we could do it right now. I mean, they could start doing it, and then it's not such a rush. if we opened that up right now?
We're following the standard, protocol for rules. So if we had a board meeting in December, a full on-board meeting in December, the rules would still just fall on that subsequent meeting and
Well,
but we don't
if,
notice
if there's
anything further.
anxiety by the teachers' unions and by other individuals, maybe it would kind of tone down their anxiety if you were to announce that the board is accepting, information on this item. And then we'll hear, and then it'll be.
We have heard. I mean, we've had 2 months and we've heard, and we can I don't think there's anything against
Okay.
anyone
I'll
continuing.
vote. I am for it, as you heard, but, if I don't know, I'm tired.
Okay. We're just gonna lay it over.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
All right, don't go away. The next 2 items are notice of rulemaking. That means we're not deciding today, we're just giving notice, and we'll have the hearings in 2 months. So the next item on our agenda is to request approve the notice of rulemaking for the rules for the administration of the School Counselor Corps grant. I ask that staff give a brief presentation before I take a motion. Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just turn it back over to Ms. Wisdom.
Thank you, everyone. So, again, just to reinforce that the next 2 items are notices of rulemaking. So this isn't something that you're being asked to decide on today. This is an initial notice. So the first one in front of you is the notice of rulemaking rules for administration of the School Counselor Corps grant. You all saw these rules last year as well. And then there was a statutory change by House Bill 18-1309 that made a change to a single definition. So we can talk a little bit about what that definition was that was changed, but literally there was a bill that passed that changed one sentence, which is what is in front of you today, to notice these rules for public comment. Additionally, the Attorney General staff took this opportunity to make some other recommended technical changes, but I want to make sure and point out the one change of substance in the School Counselor Corps grant rules. So that single change, if you follow me to page 2 of the markup, and you'll see other red in here, and those are all technical changes made by the Attorney General staff. So if you follow me to 2.00 paren 7, the definition of a school counselor changed. And it changed to also be more expansive and include a person who holds a special services intern authorization, so essentially school counselor interns, as well as folks that had been through the full program. This was brought forward by rural schools and the Grow Your Own bill because some folks are unable to have the availability of school counselors in their area. So as a reminder, the School Counselor Corps grant focuses on additional school counselors in highest need areas of our state and focuses on college and career readiness and funded at $10 million a year. So with that, Madam Chair, would you like additional information?
No, I'd like a motion, please. Colleagues? Go ahead. Notice of rulemaking.
I move to approve the notice of rulemaking for the rules of the administration of the School Counselor Corps Grant 1 CCR 301-74.
Thank you, Board Member McClellan. That's a proper motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any objection? Unanimous. Thank you. Don't go away. Except I have to find it. Next item on our agenda is a notice of rulemaking for the rules for the administration of the School Health Professional Grant, 1 CCR 301-97. I ask that staff give you a brief presentation on this item before I take a motion. Commish?
Yep, we're just turning it right back. We are very efficient with having Misty here.
I have dreams about this section, CR, and then I wake up and go, oh. Oh, no. We gotta fix this problem.
Welcome to our life.
Too many CRs. So the final notice that I'm with you for today is the notice of rulemaking for administration of the school health professional grant. You all also saw these rules last year, you may remember, and this change that's before you today was also prompted by the same bill that is prompting the change to the school counselor core grant. So it's House Bill 18-1309. You may remember that these two grants, while they may sound somewhat similar, they are distinct, and then they have very different charges and implementation. So the school health professional grant, the primary purpose of this is to reduce substance abuse prevention. And the primary change that was made. Substance abuse prevention, what did I say?
No.
You don't want to reduce that.
Reduce substance abuse or increase prevention.
Wow, this has been, and you guys think you're tired, yeah.
Have some marijuana.
Now we're heading right.
Apologies.
No problem.
Okay.
Welcome to the human race.
We would like, okay. I don't know.
we get it.
I'm gonna try to start over. You all get it, right?
We got it.
Less drug use. How about that? We'll say that. Okay. So, with that, the change that was made to the definition of a state licensed professional or educator is no longer limited to a social worker, a nurse, a counselor, or a psychologist. It broadens that definition to a state licensed professional or educator. So again, this is about the availability of the folks in those 4 roles, specifically in rural areas, which is why the rural communities requested this change. The other change, and I'll walk you through this in just a moment in the markup. The other change is from OLLS, the Office of Legislative Services, that was identified, which is a change that's required to clarify the term of the grant. So they're sending this back to all of you, and we're taking this opportunity, since there was a legislative change as well, to clarify the term of the 3-year grant must have an annual renewal by staff, and making sure that the grantees are making the expectations of the grant for renewal for the next year after that. So these changes are both on the same page, if that's helpful, which is the very first page of the markup. You'll see in 2.00 paren 3, the change for the state certified professional, and that health is struck. And then you'll also see the clarification required by OLLS in 2.01 paren 1 around an initial term of 1 year, and that grantees may receive funds for 2 additional years with an annual approval. So with that, Madam Chair, are there any other questions?
No, may I have a motion, please?
I have a question.
Come on, give us a motion. Mr. Durham, you can do it.
I move we approve the notice of rulemaking for 1 CCR 30197, rules for the administration of the school health professional grant program.
That's a proper motion. May I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you. The discussion.
now
And I just
Mr.
have a
Durham.
quick question.
Sure.
These, and I don't think it fits necessarily in this rule, but it seems to me that through some previous discussions, we separately license, some can be a licensed psychologist, but that's not good enough. We have criteria that they have to be a licensed school psychologist. Is that, my memory right on that?
They're different.
So I'm not a
Probably
licensure
not,
expert
They are.
on all of
No, they're
this,
not.
but my understanding
Psychologist
is
is a
there's a
psychologist.
licensure through our
No.
CDE process, and then there's
Clinical?
also a door
Yeah.
license.
But, so, I guess could we maybe ask the commissioner, could we look at the possibility of just getting to licensure by endorsement? If somebody holds a license from the state in any of these professional areas, that we try and eliminate as much of the bureaucracy and duplication and extra stuff as possible. I don't think it necessarily fits here, but it's an opportunity for me to raise the issue at least. So, if you'd mind taking a look at that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just say something?
Board Member Flores?
There is a big difference between a psychologist and a school psychologist. I mean, if you really think about universities who have programs as psychologists, they take up, first of all, a PhD, and then it's You have to do a clinical, you know, it's like a doctor. So you can't say that. And there are programs for school psychologists. I know the University of Texas has one for 2 years. And that's 2 years versus, let's say 7 or 8. I mean, there's a big difference. So a school psychologist can be that's not to say that there are people who are school psychologists who get a degree in psychology and then they get a master's in the area. So, I mean, there's different variations. And there is big distinctions between every one of these right here.
Thank you. Board Member Durham.
I'll just close by saying that, you know, the attempts of by higher education to create a market by manipulating the law to require additional hours and licensure is well known, and I think it's a product of the world in which we live, but we don't necessarily always have to perpetuate that circumstance.
Couldn't let it go, could you?
Nope. Been fighting this since my first year in the legislature, so nothing's changed.
Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor. Any objection? Unanimous. Woo-hoo.
Thank you.
Item
Thank you.
18, individual board members will report on previous and upcoming activities.
What about the decision on the other? Can I make a motion on that?
No. No, ma'am.
No. I just want to make a motion that
This-
we're
we
going
are-
to
we are-
table that until tomorrow.
We are not.
We already
We
did
did,
that.
I don't remember doing it.
Relax, please.
The chair did it, at her
Where did you do
discretion,
it?
Not till tomorrow, after exec session this evening.
which I know.
No, you're talking about the rules on the,
I'm talking about the schools, the two school districts.
Right.
that
Oh,
We're
we're
gonna,
gonna
I
talk
said
about
we're
that
gonna
now.
get back to those later this afternoon. There's no motion because it's not
Yeah,
before us
we're
right
not-
now.
we're not done
Right
yet.
now, we're on 18 points.
Well,
State Board of
you know-
Education member, Board Member, Flores, let's just get through this because we will get back to it. You can say anything you want to back when we get that back on the, when we get back to that topic. Right now, we are on a different topic. Look at your agenda. Look at the agenda for
I am
today.
looking at the agenda, and all
No, you're not
I'm-
looking at, you don't have the agenda in front of you.
Please don't make fun of me.
I'm not making
I'm
fun of
just-
you. I'm asking you to go to 18.0. Do you have a board member report this month?
I could.
Well, this is the time to do it.
Okay.
Mr. Durham, do you have a board member report?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board Member Flores, do you have a board member report?
Yes, I do.
Please. Are you ready?
Yes.
Go.
Let me think about it.
Okay, then
no,
let's go to somebody else, and then you think and write it down. I'm ready.
I
Board
don't have
Member
to write
Rankin?
it down.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
I went to the West Slope Superintendent's meeting, which was, and always is, very interesting, and if you recall, the superintendent of 51 quit, and so Scott Cooper, which was another superintendent, was assistant superintendent. I think he's moved into the interim spot until they hire another superintendent. Anyway, I love the West Slope superintendent meetings, and we have one this spring, and it happens to come on the same day as our board meeting, so I haven't quite
No.
decided which one I'm,
You might want to tell them.
I told them that.
yeah, I know, they're thinking about changing that.
Well, they're
Which
not
would
gonna
be
live
good.
without you, so
Okay.
we're good, we're in good shape.
They have
I-
lived without me before.
I'm sorry, what's on the
We will
same
again.
day of?
West Slope
Western Slope Soups
Superintendent
is a board meeting.
And I
day?
like to
I'm
go to
surprised.
that. And the Governor's Tourism Conference in Vail, I went and attended that, and that's always fun. Tourism in our state, as you know, is just fantastic, and West Slope is where a lot of it takes place, and the marketing people do a great job. You never see the great ads they do in the state because they're marketing outside the
Outside
state.
state,
A lot of
yeah.
Europeans come, it's a fun thing to attend.
They come to Denver too.
Then I went to the agenda setting, and then Northwest BOCES meeting, talking about accountability and frameworks, and I went to that, and Representative Rankin went too, and you were on the phone, and afterward, there was continued discussion, and it was a really good meeting, I think.
And they actually heard us and wrote it up the next day.
Yes, and
That's kinda cool.
they also gave me input to bring back to you, which I will do in the future. This was the Northwest BOCES meeting. There were about 5 superintendents. John Conti was there too. It was really good. And then I attended the Donald K. lunch a couple days ago. They had a speaker there, Doug Tuthill. Very interesting talk about educational savings accounts for students and allowing a little more choice. And he was in his lifetime was president of the union, the teachers union, when he was 22 years old. He has an interesting background and an interesting take on education, so I enjoyed that. And yesterday I attended the land trust meeting for Mr. Durham, Board Member Durham. And if you recall, I think it was our last board meeting, we talked about having them come and do a presentation on what the land trust is for education, how much money is in it. There are a few meetings coming up, and they wanted to get on our agenda for January, because after that, there'll be bills coming up and it'll all change, so they want to get a presentation together, and so I said I'd bring it back. So, and then here we are.
Yes, I had the pleasure of attending a tour at the Highlands Ranch STEM School, and also I enjoyed joining with Commissioner Anthus to tour the Academy for Advanced Learning in Aurora that saw such dramatic gains in their math achievement. So that was a great pleasure and a really informative tour, and we had a nice question and answer session afterwards to hear about what they're doing differently to achieve the results that they're achieving. I'm looking forward to attending a meeting with outgoing Governor Hickenlooper about education and workforce readiness in the upcoming month, and I'm really excited to have accepted the invitation for the Air Force Academy Superintendent's Holiday Open House. I have not attended one of those in the past, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that is like. So, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Shepherd.
Enjoyed just attending the luncheon that honored Jane at NASB. That was a great opportunity. And also helped host an HR panel for Denver Metro districts, just talking about the kind of teachers they like to hire and the kind of skills that they're looking for, and lots of meetings with constituents. So it's been a good month.
Board Member Goff.
I brought it so you could follow.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Nice. Show and tell.
Oh, there's a picture.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you. It was wonderful, and I have great gratitude for those of us who were able to be there. And I don't know, Busy, if you can, are they up there? Oh, there we are. I'm going to enjoy. Thank you for the idea. Sharing photos. There we all are. This was right after the luncheon, and I thought it was my turn to share the little people. That is my great nephew, first day of first grade. So loves it, which is something you want to have happen. And then that's my niece who great niece, first day of preschool, only she calls it pretty school. We're going to pretty school. But that was a great start for one side of the family. And then the commissioner and I got to be present when we announced the Colorado Teacher of the Year 2019. Nice. And Meg Cypress, who teaches 5th grade at Cypress Elementary, or Bradley International School in Denver, is this year's Colorado Teacher of the Year. And I don't know, but the department has other photo albums of that day, so you can check to see if we get those. Also at NASB, I participated in a school safety panel discussion, and NASB is going to be sticking around that topic for a while. There's some policy work going on. There will be a publication in January devoted solely to the whole school safety idea with various research and articles written on it. I do have a piece in that magazine, which whenever you're tempted to write, if you've had that experience, it was a good reminder for me about you commit, and it can be kind of tedious process for a month. This panel, though, in the center, you will see me next to a teacher from the Washington, D.C. area. Next to him, on his right, this young man is a senior in high school in Maryland. He's also a state board member. I can't remember the exact number of states right now who have a student member, but it's growing.
Thank you.
And there's some interest in it all across the country. But he was absolutely incredibly articulate and well-versed and prepared and astute. And he was talking later about some of the issues that he has been a part of on his state board and the influence that they bring. I can't recall, I don't think he's a full voting member. Not all students that currently are on, especially if they are high school age. A couple of states have a higher ed member, in a way that, but for K-12 specifically, most of them are not voting members, but I'll just tell you, it's a growing interest. If this board ever wanted to talk about that, there are some statutory issues we'd have to explore a little bit and pursue, but I don't think we should feel all limited all the time by some of that. We should look at that. It's really a great thing. So that was the panel, and I enjoyed it very much. And a couple other things that were of note this past month, in addition to the Teacher of the Year announcement, there have been announcements at the schools of the other 5 finalists. So each one of those people has been recognized. And the last one is coming up at the end of the month for that. I also took part in a variety of meetings with our superintendents, most of whom are districts in my congressional district. Various teacher representatives. Most of all these conversations have been about our framework discussions coming up. I also met with Terry Croy Lewis, who's the executive director of CSI, and that was a good update on some recent work that they have been doing with their schools, but especially this time in connection with CACSA, which is the Colorado Association of Charter School Authorizers. And so there's been an update on the authorizing standards. That's one organization that I think probably it's got a long-standing record now of work to up the standards of authorizers and make sure they get trained and backgrounded and oriented into the process of charter authorizing. I did talk to her a bit. I've mentioned it to Ms. Cordial, that the idea came up of a presentation sometime in the future. It might be good for us to recheck in a little bit with sometime what the latest charter community is doing in the way of local authorizing. So, and it's more than just CSI. I mean, there are all kinds of charter schools are involved. That's primarily it. I also did go to the Colorado Children's Campaign Luncheon, which was last week. I think it's the first time I've ever been the only one of us at some event.
Maybe because we didn't get invited?
I don't remember.
No, I got an invitation.
We all get all invited to this kind of thing.
No, I
But
didn't
it
get
was
invited.
very good. Another highlight of that were 4 high school
I
and
didn't.
early college age students who did the whole luncheon. Activists, they are recent and developing activists on all kinds of issues. And it was just another reminder about the really incredible thing that our young people are doing and they're capable of doing. And anytime we can bring them in or help just be there to wave yay and hopes and encouragement to them as they go out, it would be a good idea. And lastly, I went to Stanley Lake High School, which is where I ended my teaching career, but they had a first ever, as far as at least Jefferson, I think it's statewide, the first ever political science fair. Right before the election, they set up booths and tables of issues and candidates like a science fair. So every single booth and issue that was in the election, candidate and issue had a student or two who was able to talk through, about, over, under, everything you wanted to know about any major candidate or issue on the ballot. It was incredible. another example of our high school quality, so.
Thank you.
And one more thing, what I'm going to have Busy will send to you by email, NASB, the Government Affairs Committee, just a little heads up, what's coming down, we're looking at pretty soon a work on 2 big acts. One of them's the Higher Education Act, reauthorization, and the other one's IDEA.
Reauthorization.
So, within the next session,
It's mine. It's mine.
you know, after lame duck's over, I mean, things get settled in, we will have, those 2 are the major ones. The CTE bill is out. I'm not sure exactly if we've gotten the new guidance on that. I'm not sure if that's all here yet, but CTE, but higher ed is coming, but for us, I think maybe closer to home is IDEA. So there's a discussion sheet that's already prepared. I will have her email that to you. You just look it over, see if you have any input you'd like to make. They said preferably by the end of the month. I said we'll do our best. But I will be happy, I'll kind of feed our feedback back to our NASB committee, and then we can, they'll develop our NASB recommendations from there, so. That's all. Thank you very much.
Board Member Flores, are you ready?
Oh, well, yes. I attended the NASB luncheon for Jane, which was one of the issues where I actually brought it up to NASB to nominate her. Also, I participated in a dissertation committee for a doctoral student who is doing his dissertation on research and evaluation of a restorative justice dissertation. Also, I was invited by the American Educational Research Association to give to participate in a consortium, in a, what do you call them, symposium for researchers, young researchers, and on the issue of transformative skills gained in and out of the academy. So I'm very honored to be seen as a senior researcher and to be invited to participate in this symposium. Also, my doctor ordered me to take a trip, to take a vacation. So I did the deed and went to Paris.
That's what that was all about.
And I had a great time.
And your doctor's name.
Yeah.
Can we have a board trip?
Yeah, so it was great. Paris is wonderful in late October. And I went to museums. I met very interesting people from all over the world. And by the way, they weren't worried about, they were, of course, worried about the United States being the leader. They want us to be the leader. But the main thing was, believe it or not, it was Brazil. And the person, Bolsonaro, I think, where everybody in Paris was talking about Bolsonaro. And really, I wasn't even asked about Trump, other than that we had great institutions, and we should stand by our great institutions. This is the advice that was given me by, lots of people, and to take that in mind, about our presidency. But never Trump. He wasn't mentioned. So that's what I've done.
Thank you.
And also calling a lot of people to vote.
Thank you. So speaking of voters, I guess I need to thank the voters in the 2nd Congressional District for returning me to this wonderful place. Same for Dr. Sheffel in the 4th Congressional District. We're back and we're here.
And congratulations
Thank
to
you.
both of you.
Yes. I also attended the NASB conference. Number of really good sessions. I will admit that my favorite one was about early reading, and I have not had any time to go back to that PowerPoint, but there was some fascinating information there that was unlike some of the other presentations that I've watched.
The data, what, the data,
This was an expert on early reading.
right.
The
She had a
diff-
bunch of data, though, that was.
She had a
not-
ton of data.
That
that
was
I-
good.
Yep.
That
Yep,
was
so
good.
I'm looking forward to some time to do that, and I have no idea when that'll happen, but it's gonna happen. Also, I attended, I think last week, Leadership St. Vrain. They had I'm not sure what it was, but Leadership St. Vrain is a group of parents that St. Vrain brings together, and it basically they meet every month and they learn about different issues in their district, and they also learn about legislation and what we do on the state board. So there was only one legislator who attended, but it's an opportunity for them to ask questions and to learn about how is it that the school laws are generated. That's enough. So now, Ms. Birdsall, this might be your last chance. Oh, wait a minute, do we have public comment?
We did not have anybody signed up for afternoon public comment.
Okay. Yay. So this might be your last chance to call us into executive session since we're going to review you now. But would you please? I can't resist teasing you.
Well, with that introduction.
No, ma'am.
An executive session has been noticed for today's state board meeting in conformance with 24-6, 402-3 ACRS to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to 24-6, 402-3A Roman numeral 2 CRS, and concerning the evaluation of the State Board of Education employee who requested that the matter be addressed in executive session pursuant to 24-6, 402-3B Roman numeral 1 CRS. I think.
Thank you. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. I have a second. Second. Thank you. So I need